Chapter 56. Tang Dynasty. Tiantai Sect. As a righteous sect in the Tang Dynasty, Tiantai Sect had many disciples, and the sect master Taoist Tianlian was a peak grade 1 great grandmaster. Although Tiantai Sect was not as old as the Shaolin Temple, this generation was obviously in a prosperous period. In addition to the sect master Taoist Tianlian, there were 2 grade 1 great grandmasters. At this moment, several disciples of Tiantai Sect were talking in a low voice. Senior Brother Ruan, some time ago, you participated in the encirclement of the demon sect remnants. What was the result? I heard that those demon sect remnants are ruthless. A young disciple who had just entered the sect asked curiously. The middle-aged man named Senior Brother Ruan sneered and said, "What else can I do? How can those demon sect bastards be opponents of our Tiantai Sect?" This time the righteous sects joined forces, and our Tiantai Sect killed the most demon sect remnants. Senior Brother Ruan said proudly. Since 5 years ago the demon sect master and many elders of the upper realm fell overnight. Countless demon sect disciples fled in fear and scattered all over the world. Over the years, in order to eliminate the root of the problem, the righteous sects led by Tiantai Sect joined forces to encircle and annihilate the demon sect remnants several times. However, I heard that the reason why the demon sect disciples were defeated so quickly was all because of a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple. The young disciple who had just entered the sect seemed to have thought of something and asked excitedly. As soon as this came out, Senior Brother Ruan frowned slightly and finally said reluctantly, "It is indeed the Shaolin Temple's credit." Suddenly, a hoarse and cold voice came. "Oh, your Tiantai Sect killed the most demon sect disciples?" A man in a black robe slowly walked over. The man in the black robe was thousands of meters away at first, but in an instant, he had already arrived in front of Tiantai Sect. "Who are you?" Senior Brother Ruan looked at the man in the black robe without the slightest fear on his face. This is Tiantai Sect. Even if the man in the black robe has the courage, he wouldn't dare to make a move here. "Who am I?" The man in the black robe raised his hand slightly, and wisps of demon chi slowly spread and covered the surroundings. "I am the demon sect member you said." Pucci. Several disciples of Tiantai Sect, including Senior Brother Ruan, instantly turned into blood mist. "Who are you?" The deputy suzerain of the Tiantai Sect turned into an illusion and rushed over. He looked at the black-robed man seriously. "It seems that after 50 years of seclusion, some people have already forgotten who I am?" The man in the black robe laughed wildly. He flicked his finger and sent the deputy lord of the Tiantai Sect, whose strength had reached grade 1, flying. "You." The deputy lord of the Tiantai Sect spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at the black-robed man in shock. He had never imagined that the black-robed man in front of him would have such terrifying strength. At this moment, there was a sigh. "It's been 50 years since we last met, Devil Master. You're still as powerful as ever." Tiantai Sect's patriarch, Tianlian Zhenren, slowly walked over and looked at the black-robed man with a complicated expression. "What? Demon Lord? Master." If it was just 50 years he wouldn't think too much. But with the addition of the word Demon Lord, it was unusual. 50 years ago, a demon lord with great talent and vision appeared in Demon Sect. It was because of this demon lord's rule that Demon Sect flourished and almost suppressed the good faction. Unfortunately, for some unknown reason, the leader of the Demon Sect suddenly disappeared mysteriously. Without his leadership, the Demon Sect and the righteous faction were forced to retreat step by step. In the end, they were squeezed into Yongzhou. It was rumored that the Demon Sect master was dead. Otherwise, why didn't he appear for 50 years? Why did he let Demon Sect decline? But now, Tiantai Sect's deputy sect master looked at the man in the black robe not far away and was shocked. "Demon Lord, what brings you here this time?" Zhenrenzun Tianlian said solemnly. 50 years ago, the Demon Lord was peak rank 1. Now he was also peak rank 1. Although Zhenrenzun Tianlian was afraid of the Demon Lord, he was not afraid. Both of them were peak rank 1. Even if he couldn't defeat the Demon Lord, it was impossible for the Demon Lord to kill him. It was because of this that Zhenrenzun Tianlian dared to appear in front of the Demon Lord. "It's very simple." A smile appeared on the Black Lord's face. "You killed my Demon Sect disciples. I'll destroy your Tiantai Sect." As soon as the man in the black robe finished speaking, A terrifying demon chi exploded and shrouded the area. Half a day later, Tiantai Sect's sect master, Zhenrenzun Tianlian, died in the battle. 2 rank 1 deputy sect masters died in the battle. Except for a few Tiantai sect disciples who escaped, the rest died. The demon lord appeared. When the escaped Tiantai sect disciples brought the news, it immediately spread to the pugilistic world in the Tang dynasty at a terrifying speed. Maybe the younger generation didn't know, but the older generation of martial artists who had survived 50 years ago knew how terrifying the demon lord was. 50 years ago, the demon lord alone suppressed the good faction. If it wasn't for his inexplicable disappearance, the pugilistic world would have been ruled by demon sect. How is it possible? Zhenrenzun Tianlian is a peak rank 1 great grandmaster. Even if he can't defeat the demon lord, he won't die in battle, right? Could it be that the demon lord has taken that step? Countless martial artists trembled in their hearts. Although Daoist Zhang on Wudong Mountain also took that step and became a peak grade 1, Daoist Zhang is different from the demon lord. Daoist Zhang became a peak grade 1 in the 50 years after the demon lord disappeared, and his character is indifferent, detached from the world, and has no ambition. But the demon lord, once the demon lord completely dominates the entire pugilistic world, what awaits them is a real purgatory. After the demon lord appeared, he gathered the demon sect disciples scattered all over the world to rebuild the demon sect, and began to attack the righteous sects that had slaughtered the demon sect disciples. For a time the demon sect flourished, and the righteous sects were constantly defeated. During this period, the grade 1 great grandmasters of the righteous path didn't think of resisting, but every time they gathered all their strength and prepared to cut off all means of retreat, they were suppressed by the demon lord. This scene made some existences in the pugilistic world even more convinced that the demon lord must have taken that step and become a peak grade 1 great grandmaster. And just when the demon lord's demon might was monstrous, he suddenly said, 10 days later, I will personally climb Shaoshi Mountain and meet a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple. Suddenly, many martial artists faintly realized that this was the real purpose of the demon lord's appearance. A holy monk of the Shaolin Temple? Everyone was wondering, is a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple really an opponent of the demon lord? Just when the outside world was in an uproar. Shaolin Temple. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Chapter 57. Thump thump thump. The sound of a strong and powerful heartbeat kept ringing. Su Qin sat cross-legged quietly with his eyes slightly closed. Within a few hundred meters of his body, the air began to distort faintly, and a surging and profound power was constantly being nurtured and converging. Huff! At this moment, Su Qin took a deep breath and suddenly, the world's essence chi in the entire back mountain forbidden area surged and turned into a huge funnel-like phantom that was quickly absorbed and devoured by him. Time passed slowly. Su Qin's body also underwent earth-shaking changes. Under the fusion of body, divine sense, and internal strength, Su Qin's 5 viscera and 6 bowels, every piece of flesh, and every blood vessel began to transform rapidly. If a grade 1 great grandmaster has already begun to transcend mortality, then Arhat Dao Immortal is completely above all beings. Every Arhat or legend has already surpassed ordinary humans in essence. Arhat Dao Immortal, it's finally done. Su Qin slowly opened his eyes. His pupils were dark and deep, as vast as the starry sky of the universe. Su Qin stood up and looked at his hands. At this moment his body has completely crossed to another level. He can spontaneously absorb world's essence chi, and does not need external food to replenish his energy. Those who have truly reached the level of Chi Eater are immortal. In addition, Su Qin felt that as long as he willed it, he could control the world's essence Chi within several miles of him. His every movement was like the might of heaven and earth. Whether it is Arhat Dao Immortal or legend, their most powerful means is the world's essence Chi. For a grade 1 great grandmaster, even if it is a grade 1 great perfection who has transformed 3 times, they will still be wary of the human wave tactic. If they are trapped in an army of millions, they are likely to be exhausted to death. Of course, no peak grade 1 is so stupid as to take the initiative to jump into the encirclement of an army of millions. But Arhat Dao Immortal is different. At this level, unless it is a powerhouse of the same level, they will not be afraid even if they are besieged by more people. It's been 10 days? Su Qin carefully sensed for a while and knew how long it had been since he had broken through. Originally, Su Qin thought that he would only need one night to break through, but he didn't expect it to take so long. Time to go out. Su Qin quickly retracted his aura, and in a few moments, he was no different from before he broke through. After reaching the realm of Arhat, Su Qin's control over his body had reached an unprecedented level. Very soon, Su Qin left the forbidden area of the back mountain and appeared on a shady path not far from the Chor's yard. Su Qin found that the atmosphere in the Shaolin Temple was a bit strange. The disciples of the Shaolin Temple who came and went all looked flustered, as if they were facing some kind of crisis. What should we do? What should we do? The demon sect has come knocking on our door. Can the abbot and the rest stop them? Whether they can stop them or not, our Shaolin Temple is the most righteous sect. How can we be afraid of the demon sect? The two disciples of the Shaolin Temple hurriedly said a few words and rushed in the direction of the Great Strength Hall. Demon sect? Su Qin frowned and his divine sense spread out in all directions like waves. After stepping into the realm of Arhat, Su Qin's divine sense soared dozens of times. It could only cover a few hundred feet, but now it could cover thousands of feet. After a while, Su Qin sighed softly and also walked in the direction of the Great Strength Hall. Not long after, Su Qin had just arrived at the Great Strength Hall when he was stopped by the patrolling monk, Zhang Ji. "Zhengguan, why haven't I seen you these days?" Zhang Ji just asked casually, and his eyes were fixed on the field. At this moment, outside the Great Strength Hall, the people of the demon sect and the disciples of the Shaolin Temple were confronting each other. "Bald donkeys, if you know what's good for you and obediently submit to our demon sect, maybe we can spare your lives." A man with a gloomy face sneered. "Demon sect remnants." The warrior monastery's court head was hot-tempered and shouted angrily on the spot. The other court heads looked dignified, and their eyes fell on a man in a black robe. The black-robed man's aura was deep, and just by standing there, it made people feel suffocated. "Namo Amitba, Demon Lord, why do you have to force us?" Huiwen put his hands together and looked at the black-robed man. "Humph!" The Black Lord's face flashed with a trace of sarcasm. "Huiwen, you old bald donkey, I'll give you two choices. One is to submit, and the other is to destroy your sect." The Black Lord's voice was not loud, but it resounded in the ears of every Shaolin Temple disciple. Suddenly, many Shaolin Temple disciples were so angry that their faces turned red. "Namo Amitba." Abbot Huan took a step forward and stood in front of everyone. The Shaolin Temple is a great sect that has been passed down for thousands of years. How can it surrender to the demon sect? In that case, this poor monk will come and experience your supreme martial Tao, Demon Lord. When Abbot Huiwen said this, the expressions of the other court heads changed. There have long been rumors in Jianghu that the Demon Lord has taken that step and became a peak grade 1 great grandmaster. Although Abbot Huiwen is also grade 1, if he fights with a peak grade 1, the result can be imagined. "Abbot, you can't." "Yes, we can't fall into the demon sect's trap," the court head said eagerly. "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Abbot Huiwen shook his head slightly. Today, the strongest person in the Shaolin Temple is Abbot Huiwen. If he doesn't stand up, who will? Although the Shaolin Temple has a mysterious ancestor, a holy monk, but until now, that ancestor, a holy monk, has not appeared. There may be some concerns. At this time, even if Abbot Huiwen knows that he is not the Demon Lord's opponent, he can only bite the bullet. "Just an ant." The Demon Lord sneered, raised his right hand, and casually slapped down. In an instant, the terrifying demonic energy boiled and shrouded Abbot Huiwen. "Poochie!" Abbot Huiwen retreated 3 steps in a row, and finally spat out a mouthful of blood. The abbot of the Shaolin Temple, a dignified grade 1 great grandmaster, couldn't even take a single blow from the Demon Lord. "Abbot! Abbot, are you okay?" "Demon sect remnants, I will fight with you." Countless disciples of the Shaolin Temple were worried, and the court heads immediately supported the abbot. "It's okay, I'm just a little injured." Abbot Huiwen's face was as pale as paper, and he said in a trembling voice, "The Demon Lord should have held back, otherwise, even if he could survive, he would be seriously injured and dying. It would be impossible for him to still be standing." The Shaolin Temple is finished. Seeing this scene, the court heads felt their hearts turn cold. Just now, they still had a glimmer of hope in their hearts, thinking that the demon lord might not have taken that step as the rumors said. In this way, the Shaolin Temple may still have hope to repel the demon sect. But now it seems that even Abbot Huiwen, a grade 1 great grandmaster, couldn't take a single blow from the demon lord. The strength of the demon lord is far from what the Shaolin Temple can deal with. In this case, what can the Shaolin Temple use to block the demon sect? Is it possible that the inheritance of the Shaolin Temple for thousands of years will be broken at this moment? Some court heads trembled in their hearts, and their faces were full of despair. After the Black Lord defeated Abbot Huiwen in one move, he didn't pay attention to him at all. For him, even a peak grade 1 great grandmaster like Daoist Tianlian of the Tiantai sect can be easily killed, let alone Abbot Huiwen, who has just entered grade 1, a holy monk. The black-robed demon lord slowly took 9 steps forward, looked up at the majestic great strength hall, and suddenly roared, "A holy monk John Doe. I know you are in the Shaolin Temple." The Black Lord's voice rolled and resounded throughout the Shaolin Temple. Many Shaolin Temple disciples only felt their ears buzzing, and their minds were in a trance for a moment. "You killed my demon sect's disciples and almost destroyed my demon sect's inheritance. How can I ignore such a great enmity? Now the life and death of the Shaolin Temple is in my hands. If you don't come out, I will kill every disciple of the Shaolin Temple with my own hands." After the Black Lord finished speaking, he didn't speak anymore, and his eyes were fixed on every corner of the Shaolin Temple. For the Black Lord, from the beginning to the end, his target was a holy monk John Doe of the Shaolin Temple. As for the other disciples, even a grade 1 like Abbot Huiwen, he didn't care about them. A holy monk John Doe. Abbot Huiwen's heart trembled. He didn't know whether a holy monk John Doe should come out or not. With the Devil Lord's current strength, would a holy monk John Doe be a match for him? If a holy monk John Doe was no match for him, the Shaolin Temple might really be destroyed today. A holy monk John Doe. A glimmer of hope appeared in the eyes of many Shaolin Temple disciples, like a drowning person grasping at the last straw. However, time passed. A holy monk John Doe mentioned by the Black Lord didn't appear. Ha ha ha. A holy monk John Doe? Under the Devil Lord's power, he would have fled. The disciples of the Devil Gate smiled disdainfully. Are you really scared? The black-robed demon master looked disappointed. He came out of the western desert to find a holy monk John Doe of the Shaolin Temple, fight him, and then break through under the pressure of life and death. But now it seemed that he couldn't get what he wanted. There is no need for the Shaolin Temple to exist anymore. The Devil Lord shook his head slightly, his voice lonely. Just as the Devil Lord was about to give the order to kill the disciples of the Shaolin Temple, suddenly, a calm voice sounded. "You want to take revenge on me?" The next moment, under everyone's incredulous gaze. Chapter 58. Shaolin Temple. In front of the Great Strength Hall, Su Qin lowered his eyes and slowly walked toward the Black Lord. At this moment, everyone's eyes were on him. "Junior brother Zhengguan, what are you doing?" Zhangji, the patrolling monk, was stunned. He quickly walked to Su Qin, grabbed his arm and whispered, "Now the temple is facing a great crisis. Why are you here to make trouble?" Zhangji said while trying to pull Su Qin back. In Zhangji's view, even if the Shaolin Temple fought with the Demon Gate, it was a matter for the disciples of the Warrior Monastery and the Arhat Court. What did it have to do with Su Qin, a sweeping monk of the Chores Yard? Most of the disciples of the Chores Yard did not know martial arts. If they went up, not only would they not be able to solve the problem, they might even be more of a hindrance. However, no matter how hard Zhangji tried, Su Qin, who did not know martial arts in his eyes, was as motionless as a mountain. "Since he came to me for revenge, I naturally have to go up." A smile appeared on Su Qin's face. He gently pushed Zhangji away and continued to walk. What? Zhangji's mind went blank, and he did not recover for a long time. At this moment, as Su Qin walked all the way, many disciples of the Shaolin Temple recognized him one after another. Zhengguan. What is he doing? Is he trying to stop the Demon Lord? These disciples of the Shaolin Temple were so confused that they forgot to stop him for a moment. If a genius disciple of the Warrior Monastery, the Arhat Court, or even the Dharma Court rushed up and wanted to die together with the Demon Lord, they could understand. But Su Qin, he was just a sweeping monk of the chores yard. How could he be a threat to the demon lord? What's wrong with Zheng Guan? The new head of the chores yard frowned. In his eyes, Zheng Guan had always been a disciple who stood aloof from worldly affairs. He even gave up the opportunity to enter the Bodhi court. Logically speaking, such a person should be very sensible and wouldn't do anything stupid. But now, seeing Zheng Guan walk straight towards the black-robed demon master, the new handyman court head was extremely puzzled. In the end, the new handyman court head sighed softly. In the end, he couldn't bear to see Su Qin die in the hands of the furious devil lord. He took a step forward and appeared beside Su Qin. Zheng Guan, this is none of your business. Why don't you leave? The new chief of the chores court shouted in a low voice, wanting to wake up Su Qin. For the new chief of the chores yard, even if the Shaolin temple was really destroyed, a disciple like Su Qin should be the last to die. Headmaster. He's looking for me. Su Qin smiled at the new court head of the chores court and said softly, "What nonsense are you talking about?" The new chief of the chores court frowned more and more. "The devil lord is clearly looking for a holy monk of our temple. What does it have to do with you?" The new chief of the chores court was angry and amused at the same time. He didn't expect that Su Qin would think that the devil lord was looking for him. A holy monk has saved the Shaolin temple many times. His strength is terrifying. He is definitely an ancestor who has lived for more than 100 years. But what about Su Qin? He has only been in the temple for 20 years. How can he compare with a holy monk? Zheng Guan, I know you have good intentions, but the survival of the Shaolin temple is not something you can decide. The chores court head took a deep breath and sighed softly. At this moment, the Black Lord's gaze also fell on Su Qin. Huh. The Black Lord's eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint black light emerged. He is a peak grade 1 great grandmaster who has undergone 2 transformations. His demon art has long reached great accomplishment. Therefore, the Black Lord discovered at first glance that Su Qin did not have a trace of internal strength, let alone a peak grade 1 like him. He is not even as good as an ordinary person. And at this time, the group of demon sect disciples behind the devil lord had already exploded. Ha 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 ha. You bald donkeys of the Shaolin temple. Are you trying to find a disciple to die for you? Bald donkeys are bald donkeys. Do you really think we are fools and can be easily fooled by you? Ha 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 ha, even if you want to find someone to die for you, shouldn't you find a martial artist? You found an ordinary person, what do you mean? Shay. The demon sect disciples laughed wantonly. Suddenly, many of the Shaolin temple's disciples were furious. If it were not for the court heads stopping them, they would have rushed out on the spot. The Black Lord's expression became colder and colder. Indeed, the words of the demon sect disciples behind him are somewhat reasonable. This little bald donkey is most likely a scapegoat thrown out by the Shaolin temple. A holy monk nameless. You disappoint me too much. The Black Lord looked up at the Shaolin temple and said lightly, "Since you don't want to show up, I will personally kill your Shaolin temple." The Black Lord's gaze turned and fell on Su Qin. Since the Shaolin temple wants to use him as a scapegoat, the Black Lord does not mind starting with the other party. Wang! The Black Lord had just thought of this when strands of demonic energy began to spread and shroud down. When he massacred the Tiantai sect that day, he used this demonic art to restrict Taoist Tianlian and the 2 vice sect masters and finally killed the 3 grade 1 great grandmasters. Abbot, what should we do now? The warrior monastery's head looked at Abbot Huiwen and asked worriedly. Abbot Huiwen did not answer and sighed softly. The Shaolin temple will fight against the demons together. When these words came out, countless Shaolin temple disciples looked at death calmly. Fight against the demons together. Protect Shaolin. Fight against the demons together. Protect Shaolin. Fight against the demons together. Protect Shaolin. Their voices rolled straight into the sky. What's the use of morale? In the face of absolute strength, it is meaningless. The Black Lord disdainfully looked at Su Qin again. At this moment, among the many disciples of the Shaolin temple who were filled with grief and indignation, Su Qin, who was still calm, was extremely conspicuous. Just when the Black Lord was about to make a move, Su Qin raised his head slightly, his eyes deep. 5 years ago, I went to the Southern Witch Mountains demon sect headquarters. When these words came out, the Black Lord's expression changed slightly. He could tell that Su Qin's words did not seem to be a lie. At this time, Kuan Kong, a demon sect disciple who had been standing behind the Black Lord, suddenly reacted. Devil Lord. Yes, it's him. He is the nameless holy monk who massacred my devil sect. Kuan Kong hurried to the Black Lord and said in a trembling voice. When Su Qin came out just now, Kuan Kong recognized him, so he fell into extreme shock and fear. It was not until now that he came to his senses and hurriedly told the Devil Lord. When Kuan Kong said this, the whole place fell into a strange silence. Not only were the demon sect disciples in disbelief, but many disciples of the Shaolin Temple also widened their eyes. They never thought that a holy monk, who had saved the Shaolin Temple several times, was actually an inconspicuous sweeping monk in the chores yard. Chapter 59. In front of the great Buddha's hall. Everyone was stunned. The dark sect disciples were still okay. Although they were shocked, they only thought that Su Qin was hiding his strength. They all cursed the Shaolin Temple for being insidious and cunning. But many disciples of the Shaolin Temple, including the head abbot, were completely stunned. The dark sect disciples didn't know Su Qin's background, but how could they not know? Su Qin had been in the temple for 20 years, and had been a sweeping monk for 20 years. Most of the disciples on the scene often greeted Su Qin. Could such a person be the ancestor of a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple? Abbot Huiwen was stunned. The new head of the chores court was stunned. The head of the warrior monastery was stunned. The head of the commandment court was stunned. Zhengguan? A holy monk without a name? The new head of the chores court only felt a roar in his head. Before the old head passed away, he had told him to take care of Zhengguan. But now, the new head of the chores court suddenly felt that everything in the Shaolin Temple had become strange. He is the ancestor of a holy monk of our temple? Abbot Huiwen suddenly thought of the vague figure who had broken in when he was suffering from qi deviation 6 years ago. At that time, Abbot Huiwen only thought that the vague figure seemed to be very young, not like a person who had lived for more than 100 years. However, although Abbot Huiwen had doubts at that time, he only thought that he was overthinking. Based on the means shown by the ancestor of a holy monk, even if he was not a top first pin, he was not far from it. How could he be so young? Besides, Abbot Huiwen was very sure that the ancestor of a holy monk was not a disciple of the Hui generation. In this case, except for an unknown ancestor, Abbot Huiwen could not think of any other possibility. However, what Abbot Huiwen did not expect was that the ancestor of a holy monk was indeed not a disciple of the Hui generation. Instead, he was a disciple of the true generation. Junior apprentice brother Zhengguan, Zhangji stared blankly at Su Qin, his face full of confusion. 10 years ago, Shi Shui sneaked into the demon-subduing pagoda and devoured many demons imprisoned in the pagoda, entering the second stage in one fell swoop. At that time, when many monks patrolling the demon-subduing pagoda were about to die at the hands of Shi Shui, a vague figure appeared and killed Shi Shui. At this moment, the vague figure in Zhangji's mind at some unknown time had merged with Su Qin's figure at this moment. A moment later, just as everyone was still in a state of deep shock, the Black Lord's deep laughter began to ring out. So you really are a holy monk. So you really are a holy monk. The Black Lord's eyes emitted a faint black glow. It was so dark and serene that it seemed to come from the abyss. Since you are a holy monk, then today, I will use your blood to prove my mythical path. The Black Lord stomped his foot, and in an instant endless demonic energy surged wildly and spread in all directions. The Black Lord didn't know how Su Qin could escape his sight. But in any case, the opponent he longed for was right in front of him, so how could he have the patience to ask questions? I cultivated hard in the Western Desert for 50 years, watching natural disasters and comprehending the heavens and earth, and created this technique. I hope a holy monk won't let me down. As soon as the Black Lord's voice fell, the endless demonic energy suddenly changed, constantly colliding and fusing, faintly forming a black sandstorm that had shrunk countless times. Not good. It was very troublesome. Under this black sandstorm, even a grade 1 great grandmaster like Abbot Huiwen trembled all over, and a life and death crisis emerged in his heart. Holy! Your Excellency, the Demon Lord's move is probably a full blow. You can enter my Shaolin Temple's Arhat array and temporarily avoid the attack. Abbot Huiwen didn't know how to address Su Qin for a while, so he could only call him Your Excellency. In Abbot Huiwen's view, even if Su Qin was really a holy monk, his strength may not be comparable to the current Demon Lord. Therefore, in the face of the Demon Lord's full blow, it stands to reason that he should retreat. However, Su Qin shook his head and said casually, "No, it's too troublesome." Su Qin had just entered the Arhat realm, but he wanted to try how strong he was now. The Black Lord condensed a black sandstorm with his own demonic energy, but in Su Qin's view, it was just another way to use internal force. It was nothing at all. You dare! When the Demon Lord saw that Su Qin did not have the slightest intention of dodging, he was furious. The black sandstorm became even darker. The next moment, the sky became dark. The ink-black sandstorm instantly enveloped Su Qin. Be careful. Abbot Huiwen was anxious. However, he was injured at the moment and could not intervene in the fight between the Black Lord and Su Qin. Many demon sect disciples seemed to see the scene of Su Qin being torn apart by the black sandstorm. Wang! The air within 10 meters of Su Qin was faintly distorted. All the black sandstorms near this area quickly evaporated as if they had never existed. The Black Lord's expression changed drastically, and he looked at Su Qin in disbelief. The Black Lord was not the only one. The others' eyes almost popped out of their sockets. If Su Qin had been prepared and blocked the Demon Lord's attack with great difficulty, everyone could still accept it. But what was the truth? Su Qin did not even move. He stood there alone and blocked the Demon Lord's full-powered attack. How was this possible? This is your strength? Su Qin still stood in the same place, looking slightly disappointed. If the Demon Lord's attack was a few thousand times stronger, he might have felt threatened. Who are you? The Black Lord's expression was unprecedentedly serious. Originally, the Black Lord thought that Su Qin's strength was similar to his, a second transformation peak grade 1, or even weaker than him. But now it seems that the other party is most likely a third transformation peak grade 1 great perfection. Should I fight or retreat? The Black Lord looked hesitant. If Su Qin is really a grade 1 great perfection, if he continues to stay, it is very likely that he will die here. However, without waiting for the Black Lord to make a decision, Su Qin, who was standing there, leisurely took a step forward. Let's end this. Su Qin stretched out his slender right hand and gently patted the Black Lord. Humph! The Black Lord's face flashed coldly. So what if you are a grade 1 great perfection? Defeating me is easy, but if you want to keep me here, you are dreaming. The Black Lord retreated, wanting to get away from Su Qin. However, the next moment, a vast and mighty power swept out from all directions, trapping the black-robed Demon Lord in place. The Black Lord's expression changed wildly, looking at Su Qin as if he was looking at a monster. Might of heaven and earth? You are a legend. Chapter 60. You are not grade 1 great perfection. You are a legend. The Black Lord's hysterical roar of despair spread throughout the Shaolin Temple in an instant. Legend? What is a legend? A disciple of the Shaolin Temple who had just entered asked subconsciously. They had just entered the Shaolin Temple not long ago, and did not know much about the 9 grades of martial Tao, let alone the legend. However, when these new disciples of the Shaolin Temple saw the shocked faces of the senior brothers next to them, they suddenly did not dare to speak. Legend? Arhat's fruit. The commandment court head muttered to himself. In today's world, martial Tao is divided into 9 grades. Only those who transcend the 9 grades of martial Tao are qualified to be called Arhat's fruit or legend. In fact, whether it is Arhat's fruit or legend, they all have the same meaning, but the former is the name of the Shaolin Temple and other Buddhist sects, while the latter is the name of Jianghu martial artists. Legend? Zhenguan. The handyman court head's eyes were dull. Originally, Zhenguan jumped from a sweeping monk to become the ancestor of a holy monk who saved the Shaolin Temple from life and death several times. This is already hard to believe. But now, someone told him, Zhenguan is not only the ancestor of a holy monk. He is also the ancestor of the Shaolin Temple who has not appeared for thousands of years, Arhit? Isn't this too incredible? The handyman court head was not jealous, but he was shocked to the extreme and could not react for a while. The Dharma court heads, warrior monastery heads, Arhat court heads, and other Shaolin Temple court heads as well as many disciples were dumbfounded. If this sentence was not said by the Devil Lord, a grade 1 great grandmaster, they would not believe it at all. A martial arts legend? The weight of these 4 words could almost overwhelm the current world, so how could it be casually said? However, with the Devil Lord's status, he should disdain to lie about this matter. Moreover, the Devil Lord's expression and tone at this moment did not seem like he was lying. What? A martial arts legend? Compared to the shock of the Shaolin Temple disciples, the evil cult disciples who came knocking on their door panicked. They were prepared to annihilate the Shaolin Temple aggressively. Originally, they thought that with the Devil Lord holding the fort, victory was in their hands. Even if there was an accident, and the Shaolin Temple's history of Arhat's legacy would be drawn out, but with the Devil Master's means, there was no problem in protecting their safety. But now? The Shaolin Temple had Arhat in charge? How could this be possible? Although these demon sect disciples were very confident in the Demon Lord, they didn't think that the Demon Lord could defeat Arhat. These two were not on the same level at all. It's over. It's all over. Countless demon sect disciples were filled with despair. They did think of running away, but as soon as the thought came to them, they felt a faint force from all directions that imprisoned them. It was as if the entire Shaolin Temple had become the domain of a certain existence. He's a martial arts legend? The demon sect disciple Kuan Kong felt that he had heard the biggest joke in the world. He had narrowly escaped death and crossed the western desert to find the Devil Lord and invited him out. He wanted to revive the demon sect and find a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple to take revenge. And now you're telling me that the other party is a martial arts legend? This is not revenge, this is suicide. Kuan Kong suddenly recalled the scene 5 years ago when Su Qin was wearing a gray monk's robe and cleaning up the demon sect's headquarters. At this moment, despair gathered in Kuan Kong's heart and turned into a sentence. You're a martial arts legend. Why are you bullying the weak? Shay. In front of the Hall of Great Strength. As Su Qin gently waved his hand, his original body turned into a shadow. The Black Lord, who was retreating, was directly imprisoned in place, unable to move. Who are you? The Black Lord looked pale as he looked at Su Qin and asked in a hoarse voice. The so-called pressure of life and death, the so-called breakthrough, and the so-called fight had long been forgotten by the Black Lord. Now, the only thought in the Black Lord's mind was how to save his life. As long as he could live, there was hope. I'm just a sweeping monk of the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin thought for a moment and said. He didn't say this sentence out loud. In the 20 years since he joined the Shaolin Temple, Su Qin had never given up sweeping. This was obvious to all in the Shaolin Temple. A sweeping monk? The Black Lord was stunned, his face full of disbelief. A sweeping monk of the Shaolin Temple? What kind of joke was this? A martial arts legend? How could he be a sweeping monk of the Shaolin Temple? Even a 3-year-old child would scoff at such words. It was like an emperor sitting on the wealth of the world saying that he had no money. All right. You can die now. Su Qin suddenly lost interest. Originally, he wanted to borrow the hand of this demon lord to test how strong he was. He didn't expect the other party to be so weak. Ah! The Black Lord suddenly felt the pressure on him skyrocketing, almost crushing him. He immediately knew that Su Qin had no intention of letting him go. Break. Break, break, break. Even though the Black Lord knew that his chances of survival were slim, he couldn't help but struggle with all his might. In the blink of an eye, the Black Lord burned his transformed inner strength and physical body in the form of a forbidden art. Suddenly, a terrifying aura emerged from the Black Lord's body. This aura even surpassed the ordinary grade 1 great perfection. His strength suddenly increased, but the Black Lord didn't show the slightest joy on his face. This forbidden art had completely burned his inner strength and physical body. Even if he survives, his strength is bound to plummet, and even fall out of grade 1. But now the Black Lord didn't care. However, the next moment, the terrifying might of heaven and earth crushed down. Crack, crack. Almost instantly, The bones of the demon lord shattered. I didn't expect that after killing countless people in my life, I would finally die in the hands of others. The Black Lord muttered to himself. His physical body had completely collapsed, leaving only the remnants of his divinity. However, the Black Lord's divinity was far inferior to the Devil Buddha. He didn't even condense his divine sense. Once he lost the protection of his physical body, Su Qin didn't need to do anything. He would quickly dissipate into the air. Sure enough, in less than a moment, the Black Lord shook violently. His physical body completely collapsed and dissipated. The audience was dead silent. Everyone was silent. If it was said that when the Black-robed demon lord roared out the words martial arts legend, people still had doubts. But at this moment when they saw the Black Lord, a peak grade 1, couldn't even resist and directly turned into ashes, they no longer had any doubts in their hearts. Just when the disciples of the Shaolin Temple and the people of the demon sect were immersed in the shocking scene in front of them, Abbot Huiwen's tears flowed down his face. Ignoring his injuries, he trembled and said, "It's been 900 years. 900 years, my Shaolin Temple has finally produced another Arhat." Chapter 61. As the Black Lord was completely annihilated, many demon sect disciples' faces were as pale as paper, without a trace of blood. During this period of time, the Devil Lord had walked out of the western desert and re-entered the world. These demon sect disciples had been glorious. They had consecutively destroyed several righteous sects such as the Tiantai sect, and awed the martial arts world in the Tang dynasty. But now, these demon sect disciples realized that everything was gone. Not to mention the impact of the Devil Lord's death on the demon sect, whether they could walk out of the Shaolin Temple alive was a problem. After Su Qin killed the Black Lord with a flip of his palm, he seemed to have discovered something. He turned his eyes and looked at the place where the Devil Lord had fallen again. He saw a tattered animal skin roll there. It should be known that Su Qin had just controlled the power of heaven and earth within a radius of several miles to kill the Devil Lord. Under this vast and mighty power of heaven and earth, even the Demon Lord's body, which had undergone a metamorphosis, collapsed in an instant and vanished into thin air. It was not only the Devil Lord's body, but also the other objects on his body. However, what Su Qin did not expect was that this tattered animal skin did not disappear along with the Demon Lord, but instead it existed. An animal skin that can withstand the power of heaven and earth? Su Qin was interested. He instantly opened the eyes of truth and repeatedly confirmed that the animal skin was not a threat. Then, he waved his right hand and took the animal skin in his hand. After entering the realm of Arhat, Su Qin's divine mind had been greatly improved and could completely interfere with reality. Whoosh! As soon as the tattered animal skin fell on Su Qin's hand, he felt a cold feeling, as if he was holding a piece of ice. This animal skin is not ordinary. Su Qin looked slightly dignified. At this moment he realized that the reason why the animal skin was tattered was entirely because it had always been like this, not because it had been crushed by heaven and earth just now. I'll look at the animal skin when I get back. Let's deal with these demon sect disciples first. Su Qin raised his head slightly and looked at the terrified evil cult disciples. At this moment, as Su Qin looked over, the demon sect disciples lowered their heads one after another. No one dared to look directly at him. Since you have the guts to come knocking on my door, then stay here forever. Su Qin naturally wouldn't be soft-hearted. Before he became Arhat, it would take him some effort to kill this group of demon sect disciples. Moreover, these demon sect disciples weren't made of wood. They would scatter and run away. Even if Su Qin had the eye of truth to lock onto their auras, it would still take time to kill them one by one. But now, Su Qin had already entered the realm of Arhat, and he could easily control the heaven and earth power within a radius of several kilometers. As long as this group of evil cult disciples were within his range, their lives would be in his hands. Don't! A holy monk! No, Arhat, please spare our lives. We know we were wrong. Please, Arhat, let us go this time. I'm willing to be locked up in the demon suppression tower. Countless evil cult disciples pleaded bitterly. However, the next moment the mighty power of the heavens and earth swept across. The light in the eyes of these evil cult disciples quickly dimmed, and they fell to the ground with a plop. After dealing with these evil cult disciples, Su Qin glanced at the many disciples of the Shaolin Temple in the distance, who were still in shock. Then he took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. The danger of the demon sect, which was able to destroy the Shaolin Temple, ended in such an almost dreamlike way. The Devil Lord of 50 years ago reappeared in the world and wanted to use the blood of a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple as a stepping stone, but in the end, he led all the elites of the demon sect to destruction. The court heads felt as if they were in a dream. They were just ready to live and die with the Shaolin Temple, but they didn't expect such a reversal. Abbot Wh, what exactly is going on? The commandment court head subconsciously looked at Abbot Huiwen and asked tentatively. As soon as he said that, the other court heads and the disciples of the annex were shocked and looked at Abbot Huiwen in unison, waiting for some kind of explanation. At this moment, although the crisis of the Shaolin Temple had been resolved, a bigger doubt appeared in the hearts of all the disciples. What was going on with Arhat, who killed the Black Lord with a raise of his hand? I don't know about this. Huiwen was silent for a while and said truthfully, if he had known that Arhat was in charge of the Shaolin Temple, how could he have risked his life to fight the Devil Lord? As soon as Abbot Huiwen's voice fell, the other court heads and disciples were suddenly speechless. If even Abbot Huiwen didn't know what was going on, they were even more clueless. At this moment, the warrior monastery head suddenly thought of something and looked at the new court head of the handyman court with a happy expression. Junior brother, you are the court head of the handyman court and have been in the handyman court for so long. You must know the identity of that existence, right? The warrior monastery head looked at the new court head of the handyman court expectantly. The other court heads nodded secretly. Yes, that existence had been in the handyman court for 20 years. After such a long time, the new court head of the handyman court could more or less detect something. The new court head of the handyman court. You don't know, how can I know? I don't know either. The new court head of the handyman court braced himself and said. At the same time, in the handyman court, Su Qin left the great strength hall and came to the handyman court. My identity was exposed after all. Su Qin sat cross-legged and looked slightly emotional. In fact, when Su Qin broke through and entered the realm of Arhat, he didn't care whether his identity was exposed or not. Before becoming invincible, of course, he would lie low. But if he was invincible, what was the point of lying low? At least according to what Su Qin knew, there hadn't been a martial artist at the level of Arhat in the past 100 years. In other words, with Su Qin's current strength, he didn't need to care about any existence in the mortal world. To deal with Arhat, only an existence at the same level could do it. However, what is that piece of animal skin on the demon lord's body? Su Qin's mind moved, and a piece of tattered animal skin appeared in front of him. The animal skin was tattered and looked a little old, but it faintly emitted a cold feeling. This animal skin belongs to the Devil Lord. Maybe it involves some kind of secret? Su Qin carefully looked at the animal skin and found that there were inexplicable lines on it, as if it was recording some kind of information. Record. Su Qin's heart moved slightly. According to common sense, animal hides were mostly used to record information. Maybe this animal skin stores some kind of information? Su Qin's thoughts spread as he thought quickly. Being able to resist the power of heaven and earth, this animal skin is probably an item at the level of Arhat? And the information stored on it may not be seen with the naked eye. As soon as Su Qin thought of this, he released his divine sense and shrouded the tattered animal skin. Boom! Just as Su Qin's divine thought touched the animal skin, he heard a roar. Chapter 62. V-Room. The tattered animal skin gradually emitted a faint glow. As Su Qin continued to pour his divine sense into it, the glow on the surface of the animal skin grew dimmer and dimmer. Finally, with a crack, the entire animal skin crumbled and dissipated into the air. At this moment, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes. I see. Su Qin murmured in a low voice. Su Qin's guess was right. There was indeed some information stored in this animal skin, and this information could not be seen by ordinary people. Only a peerless first rank who had condensed divine sense, or even a martial arts legend, could read the information inside. No wonder there are no martial artists at the level of Arhat in the world today. It has something to do with the longevity aura from 800 years ago, Su Qin's mind was in turmoil. According to the information stored in the animal's skin, 800 years ago the world changed greatly. Several martial arts legends of that era all felt a wisp of longevity aura cutting through the sky and disappearing into the depths of the sea. This wisp of longevity aura drove several martial arts legends of that era crazy. After all, even if one entered the martial arts legend realm, one would only have a shouyuan of 500 years. 500 years of shouyuan seem very long, but in reality, for any martial arts legend, a little seclusion would take years and decades would pass. But 800 years ago, that wisp of longevity aura that cut through the sky could greatly extend the lifespan of any martial arts legend of shouyuan. Therefore, ever since they felt that wisp of longevity aura, the few remaining martial arts legends of this continent crossed the sea and chased after it. They also left an order that in the future, any newly born martial arts legends did not need to stay on this continent for too long. They could just follow in their footsteps. Of course, this order was only passed down among the forces that had once produced martial arts legends. Although the Shaolin Temple had produced Arhat before, the most recent Arhat was Tuarahan from 900 years ago. Tuarahan had passed away early because he suppressed the devil Buddha. He did not experience the Great Change 800 years ago. Therefore, the Shaolin Temple did not keep this secret. I was careless. Su Qin's expression turned solemn. Originally, he thought that there were no existences at the level of Arhat in the world, so he did not mind revealing his identity. But now, it seemed that there might not be such existences on this continent, but outside the continent in the endless deep sea, there might still be martial artists at the level of martial arts legend. For martial arts legends, they had long reached the level of immortality as chi eaters, and there was no need for them to replenish their energy through external consumption. Other than that, martial arts legends could even ride the wind and control the chi. Crossing the ocean was as simple as drinking water and eating. Longevity aura? Su Qin frowned. Although the beast's skin recorded the reason for the Great Change 800 years ago, it was a taboo when it came to the longevity aura. Thus, it only mentioned a few words before not continuing. However, even if there are other martial arts legends, what can they do? Su Qin let out a sigh of relief. At the very least, those martial arts legends were far away overseas and posed no threat to Su Qin. You fellows, go pursue the longevity aura. Su Qin shook his head slightly. Other martial arts legends might be very eager to extend their shouyuan with the longevity aura. But Su Qin was different. Ever since he stepped into the realm of Arhat, Su Qin faintly sensed that his shouyuan had skyrocketed from 400 years to 800 years. After all, Su Qin was only 30 years old now. Even if he did nothing in the future, his strength would not improve, and he could not sign in any rewards that could extend his shouyuan. He could still live for 770 years without any disasters. Why is my shouyuan 300 years longer than ordinary martial arts legends? Su Qin had some doubts in his heart. Normally, whether it was Arhat or a martial arts legend, the shouyuan had 500 years. But Su Qin had 800 years of shouyuan. Is it because I forged my body with the power of extreme yin and the power of extreme yang? Su Qin suddenly thought. After these continuous sign-ins, Su Qin also roughly understood that if a grade 1 great grandmaster wants to transform their body, they do not follow the method of yin and yang coexistence. Instead, it depends on their physique. For example, a grade 1 great grandmaster whose physique is inclined to yang relies on the path of boundless sun to transform their body. A grade 1 great grandmaster whose physique is inclined to yin uses the path of boundless extreme yin to transform their body. Like Su Qin, yin and yang coexistence has never appeared before. Is it because of the eyes of truth? Su Qin's eyes narrowed slightly. It was the eyes of truth that prompted him to find a yin attribute body refining cultivation technique and combine it with the invincible Vajra divine art to temper his body. Just as Su Qin was thinking, his heart suddenly moved, and he looked up in a certain direction. They've found their way here. With Su Qin's current perception, even if he does not use divine sense, he knows every movement in the vicinity like the back of his hand. At this moment, Su Qin noticed that Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads were rushing towards the handyman court. Su Qin was not surprised by this scene. When he returned to the handyman court, he did not deliberately hide his figure, and many disciples of the handyman court saw him. At the same time, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were walking towards the handyman court uneasily. Are you sure that he returned to the handyman court? Abbot Huiwen looked at a little novice monk who was leading the way and asked solemnly, Abbot, I have seen martial uncle Zhengguan many times. I will not be mistaken. The little novice monk who led the way patted his chest and promised. Although he did not know why the abbot was looking for Su Qin, but looking at their faces, it should not be to punish Su Qin. All the little novice monks led the way boldly. The face of the warrior monastery head next to him suddenly changed. They didn't know how many times they had addressed Su Qin as senior, but in the end, this young novice monk who had just entered the temple called Su Qin as martial uncle. Did this not mean that they were inferior to the little novice monk? In the future, you are not allowed to call that person martial uncle. The warrior monastery head glared at the little novice monk, almost scaring him to tears. Soon, a group of people entered the handyman court and stood carefully outside Su Qin's room. You can leave first. The warrior monastery head looked at the little novice monk who led the way and waved his hand. Yes, the little novice monk ran out, feeling wronged. After the little novice monk left, the surroundings suddenly fell into silence. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads looked at each other nervously, not knowing whether to speak or not. The door in front of them was as fragile as a thin piece of paper to any of them, but at this moment, the door seemed to have turned into a natural moat, high above, separating immortals and mortals. Without the permission of the existence inside, even if Abbot Huiwen and the others were given 10 times the courage, they would not dare to push the door open and enter. Just as Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were hesitating whether to speak or not, a calm and leisurely voice rang in everyone's ears, neither too fast nor too slow. Come in, all of you. Chapter 63. Come in, all of you. The voice seemed to come from all directions and was everywhere, ringing in the ears of Abbot Huiwen and the court heads. This is. Abbot Huiwen's eyes flashed a trace of horror. Although he was sure that the voice came from the room in front of him, he could not determine where the voice came from. The other court heads were the same. They looked at each other and finally, as if on a pilgrimage, they carefully opened the door and walked in. The decoration in the room was very ordinary. As long as a disciple of the Shaolin Temple for more than 10 years, they would have a separate residence like this. As a major martial arts sect in the world, the Shaolin Temple occupied a vast area, and there was no need to worry about the lack of land and accommodation. After Abbot Huiwen and the court heads entered the room, they could not help but raise their eyes slightly and look at Su Qin sitting cross-legged on the bed. At this moment, Su Qin's breath was restrained, as if completely integrated into the void. If Abbot Huiwen had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that there was a person sitting in front of him. We greet the Venerable One. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads bowed slightly and whispered. The Venerable One was a respectful title given by the monks of the Shaolin Temple to those who had attained the fruit of Arhat. In Buddhism, the Venerable One had many meanings, but it mainly meant saint and great wisdom. Get up. Su Qin looked down at the respectful Abbot Huiwen and the court heads and said. As early as when he made his move outside the Great Strength Hall, Su Qin had already expected this scene, so he was naturally not surprised at this moment. After Abbot Huiwen and the court heads got up, they stood in place blankly, not knowing what to say next. If you have any questions you can ask now. Su Qin glanced at the abbot, who had a cautious expression, sighed softly and said casually. Su Qin had a feeling that if he did not open his mouth, these people would continue to stand there. Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads looked at each other. Finally, the court head of the Arhat court braced himself and stood up. He asked cautiously, May I ask the Venerable One, 10 years ago, when my evil disciple was bewitched by the demonic thoughts, was it the Venerable One who killed him? 10 years ago, Zhan Xing, the genius of the Arhat Academy, had his whole family slaughtered by evil warriors. Because of this, the devil spirit took advantage of the situation and transformed into the successor of the devil Buddha. He wanted to destroy the Shaolin Temple. At that time, the descendant of the devil Buddha was scared away by a falling leaf, and his corpse was eventually found outside the Shaolin Temple. Although Abbot Huiwen and the heads of the various academies speculated that a holy monk was the culprit, this matter had never been confirmed. It's me. Su Qin said softly. Zhenxing was bewitched by the devil Buddha. His mind had long been distorted and could not be reversed. To some extent, Zhenxing was no longer himself at that time. He had become an incarnation of the devil Buddha's demonic thoughts. Su Qin had no choice but to kill him. Many thanks to the Venerable One for punishing my evil disciple. The court head of the Arhat court had a dim light in his eyes as he retreated. After the court head of the Arhat court spoke, the other court heads and Abbot Huan also gathered their courage and asked the doubts in their hearts. For example, why did Shui die outside the demon-subduing tower for no reason, and the changes in the seal of the back mountain and so on? Su Qin did not deny it and answered them one by one. Now that he had entered the realm of Arhat, at least on this continent, he was invincible. As long as it did not involve secrets, he did not bother to lie about other questions. Half an hour later, Su Qin looked at Abbot Huiwen and the court heads and said faintly, "If there's nothing else, you can go back." In this half an hour, this group of old guys were like curious babies asking questions. If it were not for the 20 years of vegetarian meals, Su Qin would have already asked them to leave. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads heard this and did not dare to disobey the Venerable One's order. They immediately bowed and took their leave. Su Qin had indeed solved many of their doubts. In addition to some problems, there were more difficult problems in martial arts cultivation. Whether it was Abbot Huiwen or the court heads, they all learned a lot from this half an hour of communication. Especially the court heads, each of them was deep in thought. They were afraid that after going back for a period of seclusion, they would advance further and enter the realm of rank 2. Dharma Court. After Abbot Huiwen and the court heads left the Chores Court, they came here together. That Venerable One really knows everything. There's nothing he doesn't know. The court head of the Dharma Court was full of emotion. He looked at the Chores Court with deep awe. Just now, the court heads and Abbot Huiwen asked questions one after another. The scope of their questions included internal strength, external strength, body refining, spirit accumulation, supreme arts, and so on. There was nothing that they did not ask. But Su Qin answered them one by one. Not only did he answer, but he also explained the profound in simple terms. It was difficult for ordinary people to understand the truth of the Great Tao in a few words. This was simply unbelievable. One must know that even martial artists have limited energy. Looking at the thousands of years of inheritance of the Shaolin Temple, except for the Patriarch Bodhidharma, who learned many supreme arts, even the other venerables who attained the fruit of Arhat were only good at one aspect. He was far from being able to know everything like the back of his hand like Su Qin. The other court heads heard this and nodded secretly. Indeed, they also had the same idea at the moment. Maybe that Venerable One is not a mortal like us. At this moment, Abbot Huiwen's eyes flashed and suddenly said, "Do you remember what happened in the Hall of Great Strength 20 years ago?" As soon as Abbot Huiwen said this, all the court heads were shocked. 20 years ago, there was a golden Buddha phenomenon outside the Hall of Great Strength. They all thought that it was the Buddha showing his divinity. I remember that Venerable One also entered the Shaolin Temple 20 years ago. Abbot Huiwen paused as if to control his emotions. Maybe that Venerable One is the reincarnation of a Buddha. So when he came to the Shaolin Temple, he attracted the attention of the Buddha and showed his divinity. Buddha, the reincarnation of a Buddha? The other court heads were shocked. One must know that the reincarnation of a Buddha and the Venerable Arhat were not the same thing. The Venerable Arhat was above all living beings, but after all, he only existed in the human world. But the Buddha was an existence that transcended this world. However, the court heads thought about it and felt that Abbot Huiwen's statement was very likely to be true, because Su Qin had only been in the Shaolin Temple for 20 years. In 20 years, from an ordinary person who was not even a 9th grade, to the Venerable Arhat who dominated the world, no one would believe that he was not the reincarnation of a Buddha. Well, this is the top secret of the Shaolin Temple. It's enough for us to know. Don't spread it. Abbot Huiwen glanced at the court heads and said, "Yes. Senior brother, don't worry. I know the importance of this matter." The court heads calmed down and said in unison. At the same time, Su Qin was sitting cross-legged, familiarizing himself with his power. Late at night, the full moon hung high in the sky. Su Qin's figure flashed and appeared outside the Sutra Pavilion. You can sign in now. Su Qin looked at the Sutra Pavilion. Although he had entered the realm of Arhat, he would not give up the daily sign-in opportunity. System, sign in for me, Su Qin said in his heart. Chapter 64. Nine Yang Divine Art? Su Qin was overjoyed. Nine Yang Divine Art was one of the top divine arts of the Shaolin Temple. When cultivated to the extreme, it was said that one's body was like the sun, burning mountains and boiling seas. Unfortunately, the Nine Yang Divine skill had been lost hundreds of years ago, just like the Buddha's palm, which was the most powerful divine skill. However, the loss of Nine Yang Divine Art was different from that of Buddha's palm. Buddha's palm was completely lost. With the death of the last Buddha of the Shaolin Temple, Arhat, there was no trace of Buddha's palm in the world except in the forbidden area at the back of the mountain. However, Nine Yang Divine Art was spread from the Shaolin Temple to the martial arts world of the world. It was said that Zhenrenzhang of Wudong Mountain Xinwu lineage had achieved what he had today because he obtained a fragment of Nine Yang Divine Art when he was young. He used it to transform Yang into Yin and created Tai Chi, which shocked the world. Not bad, not bad. Su Qin roughly felt the subtlety of Nine Yang Divine Art in his mind and nodded slightly. With Su Qin's current level, he could naturally see that Nine Yang Divine Art was a peerless divine art that went straight to Arhat's level. Although it was still far inferior to Buddha's palm, it was not much different from the fundamental divine arts of the Devil Buddha. In the following days, Su Qin returned to his usual life. The only difference was that Su Qin no longer had to sweep the floor every day. Ever since Su Qin's strength was exposed, Abbot Hui Wen and the other court heads wanted to worship him as if he was their ancestor. How could they continue to let Su Qin sweep the floor? Su Qin had no objection to this. Now that he had just entered the realm of Arhat, he needed a lot of time to familiarize himself with his skyrocketing power and stabilize his realm. As for signing in, every night when there was no one around, Su Qin would naturally sign in. The sign-in system was Su Qin's biggest secret. Su Qin would never let anyone know about it. Time passed slowly. The news of the Devil Lord's death and the destruction of the demon sect spread like a hurricane throughout the empire of Tang and the world. After the Devil Lord was born, he didn't ascend Shaoshi Mountain immediately. Instead, he first swept through the orthodox sects in the Tang dynasty. During this period, the Demon Lord's peak grade 1 Great Grandmaster strength has long been known to the world. Some martial arts legends even believe that the Demon Lord is not an ordinary peak grade 1, but a peak grade 1 Great Grandmaster who has transformed at least twice. However, no one had expected that the Devil Lord, who wanted to conquer the world, would fall in the Shaolin Temple. In the Tang dynasty, the imperial palace, in a certain cold and strict palace, a doddering old man in a dragon robe was looking at the information in his hand. A martial arts legend? A martial arts legend walked out of the Shaolin Temple and killed the Devil Lord? The old man in the dragon robe was naturally the Emperor of Tang. At this moment he was frowning slightly as if he couldn't figure out what was going on. Eunuch Zhao, the Emperor of Tang, put down the information in his hand and said softly, "Your Majesty." A eunuch wearing a purple official uniform appeared silently beside the Emperor of Tang and bowed. "Tell me, is this news true or false?" The Emperor of Tang looked at Eunuch Zhao and said in a deep voice. Although the information said that before the Demon Lord died, he roared, "You are a martial arts legend." But as for what the situation was at that time, relying only on this information, the Emperor of Tang could not determine. After all, this was not a cat or a dog, but a martial arts legend who overlooks all living beings in the world. Reporting back to Your Majesty, this old servant does not know about this matter. Eunuch Zhao, who was wearing a purple robe, bowed slightly and said with a humble expression, "Sigh. It's a pity." The Emperor of Tang sighed softly, "I don't have much time left. In fact, if it weren't for Eunuch Zhao sacrificing part of his cultivation to forcibly prolong his life, the Emperor of Tang should have died of old age years ago. But even so, the Emperor of Tang could not hold on for more than a few years. How has Shang'er been learning recently? Can he take charge of the overall situation?" The Emperor of Tang rubbed the space between his eyebrows and asked slowly. "His Highness Shang is learning very quickly and has not let Your Majesty down," Eunuch Zhao replied. "That's good. I have fulfilled my promise to his mother." The Emperor of Tang's voice became lower and lower. Eunuch Zhao lowered his head and did not speak. Your Majesty, there is something this old servant doesn't know if I should say it or not. Eunuch Zhao hesitated for a moment and said, What is it? The Emperor of Tang frowned. Before His Highness Shang came back, he had already married a woman and claimed that he would never marry her again in this life. Eunuch Zhao said. This matter almost made the grand tutors who taught Li Shang jump in anger. It must be known that the Empire of Tang attaches great importance to the continuation of the family line. As a descendant of the imperial family, if he doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines, it would be a joke. Oh! A smile appeared on the Emperor of Tang's face. This kid is like me when I was young. When the Emperor of Tang said this, he thought for a while and said indifferently, Since he doesn't want to marry her, let him be. I have been well behaved all my life. How can I make him afraid? As you wish. When Eunuch Zhao heard this, he slowly retreated into the dark. Mengyuan Empire. The endless grassland. A tall man gazed at the vast sky with deep eyes. If there was a grade 1 great grandmaster in the Central Plains, he would be horrified to recognize that this tall man was the supreme imperial teacher of the Mengyuan Empire. He supported the entire Mengyuan Empire with his own strength and was eyeing the Central Plains covetously. Even the emperor of the Mengyuan Empire had to bow when he saw the imperial teacher. In the eyes of the people of the Mengyuan Empire, the status of the imperial teacher is comparable to that of a god. At this moment, a figure came in and bowed to present a letter. Imperial teacher. This is the information sent back by the Empire of Tang. The figure said respectfully. The tall man picked up the paper and glanced at it. After a long time, the letter was reduced to dust without a sound. The tall man sighed softly and murmured, How God favors the Central Plains. The figure standing respectfully next to him couldn't help but say, With the imperial teacher, we can definitely conquer the heavens. Shaolin Temple. Su Qin was sitting cross-legged in the back mountain forbidden area. After entering the realm of Arhat, the progress of my strength has slowed down a lot. Su Qin opened his eyes, slightly disappointed. Before becoming Arhat, Su Qin could feel the improvement of his strength almost every day. Except for the last few years when he needed to transform his body, divine sense, and internal strength, the rest of the time, he almost crossed a realm every few years. But now, Su Qin felt the difficulty of martial Dao cultivation. It should be because my strength is too strong now. Ordinary progress can't be noticed at all. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. For example, if you have 10 copper coins and suddenly have an increase of 1 copper coin, you will definitely notice it immediately. But if you have 100 copper coins, 1,000 copper coins, or 10,000 copper coins and suddenly have an increase of 1 copper coin, you will probably not even look at it. Su Qin was facing this dilemma at the moment. He was too strong. After attaining the realm of Arhat, Su Qin not only controlled his own strength, but also the strength of heaven and earth. Chapter 65. Sigh. Looks like I still have to rely on myself to cultivate martial arts. I have to take it one step at a time. I can't take any shortcuts. Su Qin's expression was slightly emotional. With a thought, a bottle of white jade-colored medicinal pills appeared in front of him. As soon as the bottle of pills appeared, the essence qi in the surroundings started to vibrate. When Su Qin opened the bottle and poured the pills into his hand, the essence qi in the surroundings started to boil. Su Qin frowned and spread out his divine will. In an instant, the surging heaven-earth yuan qi was completely suppressed, and the surroundings returned to normal. Glazed golden core. Su Qin looked at the colorless, pure and transparent medicinal pill in his hand and muttered. The glazed golden core was a legendary pill in the Shaolin Temple. Only the Venerable Arhat was qualified to make it. Even so, the Venerable Arhat had to spend a lot of time and energy to make a glazed golden core. He even had to use his own origin to make it. Normally, unless there was a special reason, no Venerable Arhat was willing to make a glazed golden core because it wasn't worth it. The Shaolin Temple had been open for thousands of years, and no more than 10 glazed golden cores had appeared. However, the glazed golden core was so difficult to make because its effect was too terrifying. Even the Venerable Arhat could save decades of hard work after taking a glazed golden core. During the period when the effect was maintained, It would be easier for the Venerable to sense the world and control the essence qi. Looks like I have to use it sparingly. Su Qin looked at the glazed golden core in his hand and thought. He has been signing in at the Shaolin Temple for 20 years, but he has only obtained a few hundred glazed golden cores. Go! Su Qin swallowed the glazed golden core. The glazed golden core didn't melt in the mouth like the Grand Restore pill. It was unusually sturdy and kept sinking into Su Qin's stomach, slowly releasing its effects. Su Qin felt that his strength, which had remained stagnant, slowly began to rise again. In addition, Su Qin also noticed that after taking the glazed golden elixir, his control of heaven and earth yuan qi became easier. Before he took the glazed gold core, Su Qin could only control the natural energies within a radius of a few miles. But now Su Qin felt that this range had at least doubled. What did this mean? One had to know that the battle between Venerable Arhat had already transcended himself. It was equivalent to a confrontation between two worlds. At this time, the importance of controlling the heaven and earth energy was obvious. This glazed golden core not only saved Su Qin tens of miles of hard work, but also nearly doubled his strength during the duration of the medicinal effect. The effects of the medicine will last for about 1 to 2 months. Su Qin estimated in his heart that he was in a good mood. Although after taking the glazed golden elixir, his cultivation speed was still not as fast as when he was at the 9th level of martial arts, but he was still much faster than other Venerable Arhat and martial arts legends. Time passed slowly. In order to obtain a sufficient supply of glazed golden elixir, Su Qin would sign in at the Bodhi Court. Of course, this was not absolute. Sometimes Su Qin would also sign in at the Demon Subduing Tower, or the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. On this day, Su Qin passed by the Demon Subduing Tower and suddenly stopped. Counting the time, it's been a long time since I signed in here. Su Qin's thoughts moved. Although the things that come out of the Demon Subduing Tower are basically related to demons, nothing is absolute. What if something good comes out? Thinking of this, Su Qin said silently in his heart. System sign in. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully and obtaining the Demon Subduing Seal. Prompt. This place is about to run out of Dao accumulation and will soon become a non-repeatable sign in place. 2 consecutive cold, mechanical sounds resounded in Su Qin's ears. Non-repeatable sign in place? Su Qin was slightly taken aback. Is the Dao accumulation about to run out? Su Qin's mind turned quickly and finally he sighed softly. In fact, Su Qin had long known that such a day would come. On the first day of activating the system, Su Qin knew that the system's sign-in was determined by the amount of Dao accumulation at the sign-in place. The more Dao accumulation, the more sign-in. But no matter how much Dao accumulation there will be a day when it is exhausted. If the Demon Subduing Tower is like this, the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion and the Bodhi Court will probably be the same in the future. What a pity. Su Qin turned around and left. Although Su Qin basically has no use for the cultivation techniques and treasures obtained from signing in at the Demon Subduing Tower, it is still a little distressing to lose a place to fleece for nothing. Demon Subduing Seal? Su Qin's mind merged into the system space. In a corner of the space there was a small square seal floating in the air. This small seal was pitch black, and its surface was faintly stained with some blood. In addition, Su Qin felt a monstrous suppression from this small seal. All the demons in the world can be suppressed. Su Qin had a feeling that if the Demon Lord was still alive, his strength would be suppressed by 99% just by looking at this small seal. This small seal stained with blood is simply the nemesis of the demon path in the world. Not bad, not bad. Su Qin was extremely satisfied. Although the Demon Lord is dead, and the demon sect is almost destroyed, Su Qin knew through the animal skin that there may be martial arts legends of the demon sect in the endless deep sea outside the continent. Now that he has obtained this small seal, Su Qin's confidence suddenly increased. In the following time, except for signing in, Su Qin spent almost all his time in the back mountain forbidden area. The effect of the glazed golden core lasts for 1 to 2 months. Su Qin basically takes a new glazed golden core every time the effect of the previous one ends. According to the ancient records left by the Shaolin Temple, the realm of Venerable Arhat is divided into 9 levels. When one first enters the realm of Arhat, it is the first level of Arhat. After that, it is the second level of Arhat, the third level of Arhat, until the 9th level. Su Qin sat cross-legged, and the cultivation realm of Venerable Arhat quickly flashed through his mind. Venerable Arhat is like this, and martial arts legends are similar. 900 years ago, Pao was the first level of Arhat. He used the Buddha's palm and only suppressed the Devil Buddha. This means that the Devil Buddha is stronger than Pao Arhat? Su Qin guessed in his heart. At the same time, in an inn, a storyteller continued to speak eloquently. You're right. It is said that the Devil Lord's strength is unparalleled. He led the elites of the Devil sect and attacked the Shaolin Temple, wanting to destroy this 1,000-year-old temple. At this moment, a Venerable Arhat walked out of the Shaolin Temple, and with a raise of his hand, the demons of the Devil Path were reduced to ashes. Many diners listened with relish. Now that the Devil Lord was destroyed in the Shaolin Temple, rumors were flying everywhere. Some said that Arhat from hundreds of years ago was in the Shaolin Temple. Some said that a passing martial arts legend killed the Devil Lord, and so on. And in a corner of the inn, a man in white with a faint flying knife mark between his eyebrows suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the Shaolin Temple. Venerable Arhat? Chapter 66. The Shaolin Temple actually has Venerable Arhat? The white-robed man with a faint flying knife mark on his forehead frowned slightly. If someone who is familiar with Jianghu is here, they will definitely recognize that the white-robed man is the successor of Xiao Li's flying dagger. Xiao Li's flying dagger never misses. These 8 words are famous all over the world. Even those grade 1 great grandmasters who roam the martial arts world are extremely afraid of the flying dagger descendant. It shouldn't be Venerable Arhat, it's just a rumor. The white-robed man thought for a while and shook his head. One must know that whether it is Venerable Arhat or a legend, they are both rare. If the Shaolin Temple really has an Arhat, then how could it be that they don't have a grade 1 great grandmaster and almost fell out of the great sects? It's just that the Demon Lord's death is a fact. With the strength of the Demon Lord, I'm afraid that it is a grade 1 great perfection that can make him unable to escape. The white-robed man stroked his chin, his eyes filled with thoughts. He is not a fool. Even if he doesn't think that the Shaolin Temple has Venerable Arhat, he does not think that the Shaolin Temple is a soft persimmon. But isn't this what I want? A grade 1 great perfection. If I observe his divinity, can he give me enough pressure? The white-robed man's eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of heat. The white-robed man did not intend to provoke the grade 1 great perfection of the Shaolin Temple. A grade 1 great perfection's body, divine sense, and internal strength have completed the transformation. It is far from what he can resist. The white-robed man just wants to use the strength of the other party's divinity to pressure himself to take the last step. The personalities of the successors of the flying dagger are different. Some are approachable, some are gentle, some hate evil, and some pursue the limits of martial Tao. But this white-robed man pursues the limits of martial Tao his whole life. Every successor of the flying dagger has mastered the flying dagger divine art. The flying dagger divine art is different from the vast majority of martial arts in the world. The flying dagger unique skill was a spiritual secret skill. To put it simply, if one wanted to block the flying dagger thrown out by the successor of the flying dagger, it was useless to rely on inner strength and physical strength alone. He could only depend on whether his god was strong enough. If the god could withstand it, he would live. If the god couldn't block it, it would die. As such, normally, if a martial artist below grade 1 encounters the descendant of the flying dagger, they will definitely die. As for a grade 1 great grandmaster, only a grade 1 great grandmaster who has begun to nurture their own divinity can block it. However, this was not absolute. It still depended on whether the god of the flying dagger was strong enough. Of course, the flying dagger lost art was not without its flaws. Every time the descendant of the flying dagger swung his blade, he would exhaust all of his energy and would need a period of time to recover. At that time, the descendant of the flying dagger might not even be able to defeat an ordinary person. In an individual fight, the descendant of the flying dagger can instantly kill any martial artist below grade 1 great grandmaster. However, in the face of the encirclement, the successor of the flying dagger could only admit defeat, because he could only swing his blade once in a short period of time. After that, he would be equivalent to a cripple. Since the birth of the white-clothed man, He had swung his blade 9 times, and each time a powerful martial artist fell. The strongest one was a grade 1 great grandmaster from Nanming country. Through these 9 blades, the white-clothed man constantly sharpened his god. He was almost one step away from transforming his god and condensing his divine sense. Unfortunately, although this step seems simple, in fact it is like a natural chasm. If he did not have enough stimulation from the outside world to withstand the pressure of the powerful martial artist's spirit, the successor of the flying dagger would not have been able to complete this last leap. It's a pity that eunuch Zhao in the Emperor of Tang's palace seems to have condensed his divine sense, but I can't enter the imperial palace at all, the white-clothed man sighed. However, I can't enter the imperial palace, but I can still enter the Shaolin temple. The white-clothed man's spirit shook. Although the Shaolin temple is a martial arts sect, it does not prohibit pilgrims from entering to worship Buddha. The white-clothed man can disguise himself as a pilgrim and sneak into the Shaolin temple. As long as he enters the Shaolin temple, the white-clothed man can feel all the gods nearby through the flying dagger divine art. As long as the grade 1 great perfection is still in the Shaolin temple, it will not escape the white-clothed man's perception. Shaolin temple. Su Qin completed today's sign and opportunity. His eyes turned slightly and looked outside the Shaolin temple. Since the death of the demon lord, there have been many spies hiding in the dark outside the Shaolin temple. Even the pilgrims who enter the temple every day to worship Buddha are disguised by martial artists. Although Su Qin is clear about this scene, he is too lazy to take action. As long as they don't disturb him, the rest will be taken care of by the abbot. By the way, when the 9-yang divine art is cultivated to the extreme, it is said that one can burn mountains and boil seas. I can try it today. Su Qin's thoughts moved. 9-yang divine art is a Buddhist divine art. Su Qin's cultivation of 9-yang divine art is indirectly corroborating with the creator of 9-yang divine art. After entering the Arhat realm, one needs to gather the Tao of 100 schools of thought to verify oneself. Thinking of this, Su Qin returned to the back mountain, sat cross-legged, and quickly operated the 9-yang divine art. Outside the great strength hall, the white-clothed man disguised himself as a pilgrim and walked to a corner without leaving a trace. After stopping, the white-clothed man glanced around and took a deep breath. Just for a while. Using the flying dagger divine art to observe the god of others, as long as it is not long, even a grade 1 great perfection will not notice anything. The white-clothed man calmed down and thought silently. As for whether he can withstand the god of a grade 1 great perfection, the white-clothed man is still confident. As the successor of this generation's flying dagger, he is extremely good at God. As long as he does not seek death and observe the god of a legend, it should not be a big problem. Thinking of this, the white-clothed man gently closed his eyes, raised his right hand, and touched the flying dagger imprint between his eyebrows. Wang! The next moment, the white-clothed man only felt his spirit rising infinitely, and he could vaguely perceive the light spots all around him. Is that the god of the many disciples and pilgrims of the Shaolin temple? The white-clothed man did not pay attention to this, and continued to spread his thoughts in all directions. This is not it. That is not it either. The white-clothed man frowned slightly, and cold sweat faintly appeared. If he continues, he is afraid that he will exceed his limit. Just when the white-clothed man was about to give up, his thoughts finally spread to the back mountain of the Shaolin temple. The next moment, the white-clothed man saw an unforgettable scene. He saw that within the range of his perception, 9 vast and scorching great suns suddenly appeared. The 9 suns crossed the sky, shining brightly, illuminating the darkness and burning the void. Wherever the 9 suns passed, all things were silent, and life was extinguished. This is, the white-clothed man only felt that his god was beginning to collapse, and he knelt on the ground with a plop, his eyes bleeding, and his expression was extremely frightened. Chapter 67. The white-clothed man trembled and knelt on the ground. The flying knife mark between his eyebrows faintly began to collapse. It must be known that the descendants of the flying knife did not cultivate their internal strength, nor did they cultivate their body. They only focused on the cultivation of their divinity. Of course, not cultivating their internal strength does not mean that the descendants of the flying knife do not understand martial arts at all, but compared to their powerful divinity, the internal strength of the descendants of the flying knife is negligible. It is because of this extreme that each generation of the descendants of the flying knife is terrifying. But at this moment, the flying knife mark that manifested the white-clothed man's divinity began to collapse. How incredible is this? Maybe a real grade 1 great perfection can kill the white-clothed man, but it is impossible to destroy the white-clothed man's divinity. The divinity not only represents the spiritual cultivation of the white-clothed man, but also his own beliefs. The body can die, but beliefs are not so easy to destroy. That is, the descendant of the flying knife's eyes bled. He just spread his perception through the flying knife divine art and barely got close to the back mountain forbidden area, and then looked at it from a distance. As a result, 9 vast and scorching great suns appeared in the sky, as if they had returned to the ancient mythological era. The 9 great suns descended and filled the world. How could the white-clothed man's divinity withstand all this? It collapsed on the spot, and even an inexplicable backlash came to his body. How can there be such a vast and incredible divinity in the world? The white-clothed man's voice trembled slightly. Normally, the divinity of an ordinary person is almost equivalent to a dot of light. Maybe the divinity of a martial artist is slightly bigger. But even the divinity of a grade 1 great grandmaster is only comparable to a fireball. However, the god that the white-robed man had sensed from the forbidden grounds at the back of the mountain was comparable to the deep void. It encompassed and contained everything. At the same time, back mountain forbidden area, Su Qin, who was operating the 9 yang divine art, quietly opened his eyes. Is someone spying on me? Su Qin raised his eyebrows. When he was cultivating just now, he vaguely felt a peeping gaze. It wasn't exactly spying. It was more like an ant accidentally glancing at you from afar. If he hadn't entered the realm of Arhat, Su Qin might not have noticed it. After all, this peeping was too inconspicuous. However, after attaining the realm of Arhat, Su Qin's control over himself and the outside world had reached an extreme. That was why he was able to easily lock onto this spy. Interesting. Su Qin stood up and took a step forward. In an instant, Su Qin left the back mountain and came to a corner of the Shaolin temple. In front of Su Qin was a man in white who was kneeling on the ground and trembling all over. So it's this generation's successor of the flying dagger? Su Qin only took a glance to understand the cause and effect of the matter. Although Su Qin hadn't been out of the Shaolin temple a few times, he had heard about the deeds of the successor of the flying dagger. The Shaolin temple had been open for thousands of years. Many a holy monk had fought with a certain successor of the flying dagger. After returning to the Shaolin temple, they would record it in an ancient book and then put it in the Sutras Pavilion. Su Qin had stayed in the Shaolin temple for more than 20 years, and often saw this in the Sutras Pavilion. According to the records of a holy monk, the unique skill of the flying dagger mastered by the successor of the flying dagger was a pure spiritual mystic skill. It was similar to the demonic will split parasitism technique or the Tao heart demonic seed technique in the Sky Devil strategy. Even if he survives the collapse of his spirit, he will be a cripple. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated as he judged in his heart. At this moment he had roughly understood why the man in white ended up like this. It was nothing more than overestimating himself and wanting to peep at his spirit, with the unique skill of the flying dagger. But it was a pity. Su Qin's spirit had already condensed into divine will, and with the attainment of Arhat, it had skyrocketed many times. In addition, at that time, Su Qin was practicing the 9 yang divine art in the forbidden area of the back mountain. The power of the 9 suns was everywhere and reflected on his spirit. How could the man in white be able to peep at it? Greetings, Venerable Arhat. The man in white saw Su Qin appear out of thin air and faintly felt that the aura on him was the same as the one in the forbidden area of the back mountain. His voice was bitter. At this moment, how could he not know that there was really a Venerable Arhat in the Shaolin temple? If he had known this, no matter how confident and arrogant the man in white was, he would not have thought of peeping at a Venerable Arhat's spirit. What a pity! Su Qin looked at the man in white and shook his head slightly. He had no intention of saving him. The man in white had only himself to blame for his fate. He could not blame anyone. Besides, his spirit had collapsed. Su Qin could not save him even if he wanted to. Thinking of this, Su Qin turned and left. He returned to the forbidden area of the back mountain to meditate on the 9 Yang divine art. Soon after, the man in white was found in the Shaolin temple. Abbot Huiyuan recognized that the man in white was the successor of the flying dagger of this generation. Abbot, I have disturbed the venerable of your temple. I deserve to die. Please take me in. I am willing to accompany the green lamp and the ancient Buddha for the rest of my life. The man in white lowered his eyes and said in a deep voice. Before coming to the Shaolin temple, the man in white had always been pursuing the limits of martial arts. But after entering the Shaolin temple and barely peeping at the tip of the iceberg in the forbidden area of the back mountain, he realized how big the world was. So what if he pursued the limits of martial arts? Compared to the one in the back mountain, he was still a drop in the ocean, unreachable. The backlash of his physical body, coupled with the collapse of his spirit, made the man in white disheartened. He had the idea of entering Buddhism and ending his life. Benefactor, you have to think carefully. Abbot Huiyuan and the other court heads looked at each other and said slowly. Although the man in white was basically a cripple at this moment, he was still the successor of the flying dagger of this generation. Whether it was eyesight or knowledge, he was much better than ordinary martial artists. If the man in white really entered the Shaolin temple, it would be good for the foundation of the Shaolin temple. Abbot, I have thought it through. The man in white sighed in his heart and said in a firm tone. In that case, this poor monk will personally shave your head. Abbot Huiyuan put his hands together and chanted a Buddha's name. Time flowed by and the years went by. In addition to signing in every day, Su Qin continued to cultivate and meditate. Ever since he learned that there were still martial arts legends outside the mainland, and in the depths of the endless ocean, Su Qin's desire for strength surged again. Whether it is the venerable arhat or the martial arts legends, if they want to continue to become stronger and step into an even more incredible realm, they need not only to cultivate themselves, but also to understand the world. Su Qin sat cross-legged, and his eyes became brighter. During this period of time, Su Qin's cultivation in the arhat realm has been quite smooth through his own efforts and the continuous use of glazed golden cores. Chapter 68. What a pity! The cultivation in the realm of arhat is completely different from the 9 grades of martial arts. After so long, I still haven't touched the bottleneck of the second heavenly layer. Su Qin sat cross-legged and couldn't help but sigh at the difficulty of cultivation. But I feel that soon, as long as I take dozens of glazed golden cores, I can almost step into the second heavenly layer. Su Qin guessed in his heart. Not only can the glazed golden core provide a huge amount of medicinal efficacy for Su Qin to absorb at all times, but it can also allow Su Qin to be in a state of epiphany at all times, allowing him to better understand and control the world. I need 1 to 2 months to digest 1 glazed golden core. Dozens of glazed golden cores will take about 100 months? Less than 10 years? Su Qin silently calculated again and was quite satisfied in his heart. It took 10 years to step into the second heavenly layer of arhat, which was neither too fast nor too slow. If the past generations of venerable arhat of the Shaolin temple, or the martial arts legends outside knew what Su Qin was thinking at this moment, they would probably vomit blood in anger. Be it venerable arhat or martial arts legends, if they want to enter the second heavenly layer from the first heavenly layer, without other opportunities, it will take at least 100 years or even hundreds of years of hard work. Many martial arts legends were still in the first heavenly layer, until Shoyuan died of old age 500 years ago. But what about Su Qin? 10 years to enter the first heavenly layer, and he still thinks it's not fast? Next, Su Qin returned to his usual life again. Sign in, cultivate, this cycle continues. Perhaps for some people this kind of life is extremely boring, and even lonely to the point of driving them crazy. But in Su Qin's heart, it's extremely enjoyable. Everything in the world, power, beauty, wealth, is just a passing cloud. What can be more comfortable than feeling that you are getting stronger every day? And just when Su Qin was addicted to sign in and cultivate, the Shaolin temple also regained its peace. After the news of the Devil Lord's death spread, many people in Jianghu wanted to visit Su Qin. However, Abbot Huiyuan rejected all of them. Su Qin had already told Abbot Huiwen not to disturb him unless it was a matter of life and death for the Shaolin Temple. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the Shaolin Temple to recruit disciples. The Shaolin Temple was a great martial arts sect in the world. In order to continue its legacy, it needed to maintain the number of disciples every year. Could not be too much, but it could not be too little. After all, whether it was the Bodhi Yard or the other yards, the annual supply of elixirs or martial arts resources was limited. The more disciples there were, the more resources would be distributed to each disciple. In this way, it was very likely that some geniuses would be buried. But it couldn't be too little. If it's too little, if something happens in the future, it may lead to a shortage of disciples. For any martial arts sect, a shortage of disciples is an extremely terrible consequence. If it's light, it will decline, and if it's heavy, it will directly be cut off. In history, many great martial arts sects like the Shaolin Temple disappeared because of a shortage of disciples. Dharma Court. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads gathered here. In addition to them, there was also a child about 10 years old. This child faintly exuded a special aura, as if some kind of Zen sound was chanting, extremely magical. Of course, this special aura can't be detected by ordinary people. Only the martial artists of the upper realm, whose body has begun to bear the world's essence qi, can vaguely feel it. This child is fated with Buddha. The Dharma court head carefully observed the child, his eyes full of amazement. This child has never been exposed to any Buddhist cultivation technique, but he can show such a Buddhist vision. It's simply rare to see one in hundreds of years. Yes. When I first saw it, I also couldn't believe it. The disciplinary court head nodded, and his gaze fell on the child again. With the aptitude he showed, as long as he doesn't die halfway, his future achievements will at least not be lower than grade 1 great grandmaster. When these words came out, none of the other court heads refuted. Even Abbot Huiwen was silent, apparently agreeing with this sentence. The evaluation of the disciplinary court head was already very high. The child was only 10 years old, and he already concluded that his future achievements will not be lower than grade 1 great grandmaster? What does this mean? It means that his potential is terrifyingly high. Although Abbot Huiwen is a grade 1 great grandmaster at the moment, and his talent is also good, but even if Abbot Huiwen is confident, he wouldn't dare to say that he will become a grade 1 great grandmaster at the age of 10. In martial Dao cultivation, if you want to enter grade 1, martial Dao aptitude is one aspect, but the acquired opportunities, tempering one's mind, and luck are also important. But now, the court heads and Abbot Huiwen concluded that the child can step into grade 1 just by looking at the aptitude shown by him. It can be imagined how high the child's position in the heart of the abbot is. You go first. Abbot Huiwen saw that the child's face was a little pale, and immediately understood that the other party was frightened, and immediately let the disciple take him to rest. Okay. You say it. What do you think of him? Abbot Huiwen turned his gaze and looked at the other court heads. The court heads looked at each other, and finally, the warrior monastery head coughed softly. Abbot, although there are many disciples in the warrior monastery, there are not many who can become useful. It is better for the warrior monastery to accept him. Nonsense. Before the warrior monastery head could speak, he was interrupted by the Arhat court head. Almost half of the disciples who enter the warrior monastery every year enter your Arhat court. In contrast, the Arhat court is really miserable. When the Arhat court head said this, he paused, looked at Abbot Huiwen and said tentatively, "But if the Arhat court accepts him, my commandment court is also short of people recently." Abbot Huiwen saw the court heads competing with each other, and suddenly he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Stop it." Abbot Huiwen waved his hand. "None of you are qualified to accept that child." Abbot Huiwen glanced at the crowd and finally added, "Neither am I." As soon as the words came out, the court heads were suddenly puzzled. If they were not qualified, then who was qualified? Only the Dharma court head looked thoughtful and asked carefully, "Abbot, you mean to ask the Venerable to accept him?" "That's right." Abbot Huiwen nodded slightly. When the other court heads heard this, they were slightly surprised, but felt that it was very reasonable. With the aptitude that the child showed, even if they did accept him, they didn't know how to guide him. The next day, Abbot Huiwen took the child and walked step by step toward the forbidden area in the back of the mountain. "Abbot, where are we going?" The child blinked, and his face was full of confusion. "Where are we going?" Abbot Huiwen stopped and was silent for a while, and an inexplicable awe appeared in his eyes. "I'll take you to see the real Buddha." Chapter 69. A True Buddha. The child nodded as if he understood, not daring to continue speaking. For some reason, the child vaguely sensed the seriousness of the abbot, as well as the supreme existence he was about to meet. "When you go in later, don't speak loudly. You must be respectful and don't show any emotions," Abbot Huiwen reminded the child. In Abbot Huiwen's view, the child was only in his teens after all. If he lost his composure in front of the Venerable One, who could bear the consequences if the Venerable One blamed him? The child was very sensible, and remembered the abbot's words in his heart. Soon, Abbot Huiwen came to the forbidden area of the back mountain. Disciple Huiwen requests an audience with the Venerable One. Abbot Huiwen bowed and said loudly. A moment later, a calm voice sounded in Abbot Huiwen's ears. "Come in." Abbot Huiwen was shocked, and immediately led the child behind him into the forbidden area of the back mountain. Inside the forbidden Buddha mountain, Su Qin sat cross-legged, opened his eyes and looked at Abbot Huiwen. "You want me to take him as a disciple?" Su Qin's eyes turned slightly, and looked at the child next to him, who shrunk his head and did not dare to look at him directly. Abbot Huiwen did not need to say anything. Su Qin already knew the purpose of Abbot Huiwen's visit. "Yes," Abbot Huiwen immediately said. "This child's talent is hard to come by in hundreds of years, and he has an affinity with the Buddha. If I and the other court heads take him in, it will definitely ruin his talent. His talent is not bad. He was born with the Buddha's heart." There was an inexplicable whirlpool in the depths of Su Qin's eyes, as if he could see through all the qi in the world. It was the eye of truth. Ever since he stepped into the realm of Arhat, the eye of truth seemed to have undergone some changes, and his grasp of qi had become more subtle. Under the observation of such a magical power, everything about the child was as easy as flipping the palm over for Su Qin. He could see everything clearly. Buddha heart? Abbot Huiwen's pupil shrank. In Buddhism, the Buddha heart was an illusory but real thing. Regardless of whether it was the cultivation of Buddhist techniques or the comprehension of Buddhist scriptures, a Buddhist disciple who possessed a Buddhist heart would be able to advance at a tremendous pace as if he had the help of the heavens. In the thousands of years since the Shaolin Temple's establishment, only 10 disciples with Buddha's heart had appeared. The final achievements of these 10 Buddha heart disciples were at least peak grade 1, and there were even 3 grade 1 great perfection. Abbot Huiwen had thought that the child's aptitude was terrifying, but he did not expect the child to have a Buddhist heart. It should be known that the possessor of the Buddha's heart is at least a peak grade 1 great grandmaster, not the grade 1 great grandmaster that Abbot Huiwen and the court heads had guessed. Although peak grade 1 great grandmasters and grade 1 great grandmasters both belong to grade 1 realm, the gap in combat power is like a natural chasm. "Does he have a Buddhist name?" Su Qin asked casually. When Abbot Huiwen heard this, he immediately suppressed the shock in his heart and quickly said, "This child has no parents and has a miserable life, so I named him Xianku." "Xianku?" Su Qin smiled. "I understand. You go out, I'll think about it for a while." Su Qin slowly closed his eyes and said softly, "Yes." Abbot Huiwen bowed again and respectfully led Xianku out of the back mountain, until Abbot Huiwen completely left. Su Qin sighed. "It's a pity. It's an incomplete Buddha heart." Su Qin shook his head slightly and said slowly. As early as the first time, Su Qin noticed that Xianku's Buddha heart was incomplete. If it was a complete Buddha heart, it would be impossible for Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads to see any abnormalities. For a true Buddha heart possessor, other than those peak grade 1 who have condensed divine sense, or even venerable Arhat in legends, no one else would be able to discover it. Only when the Buddha heart possessor really accumulates and soars to the sky, will the world know about it. Of course, Su Qin is not interested in the Buddha heart possessor. Not to mention that Xianku's Buddha heart is incomplete. Even if it was a complete Buddha heart, so what? Throughout the thousands of years of the Shaolin Temple, the 10 Buddha heart possessors, the highest achievement was only grade 1 great perfection. Perhaps in the early stage of cultivation, Or even in the grade 1 realm, the Buddha heart possessor is like a god, incredibly fast. But if you want to take the last step and achieve Arhat, just relying on the Buddha heart is not enough. Even when a grade 1 great perfection is about to capture the chi between heaven and earth, the Buddha heart will drag you down. This is also the reason why none of the 10 Buddha heart possessors in history can achieve Arhat. Success is due to the Buddha heart. Failure is due to the Buddha heart. Next, Su Qin immersed himself in cultivation again. The 9 yang divine art obtained last time, when cultivated to the extreme, can produce 9 kinds of yang power. Su Qin raised his right hand, and 9 kinds of yang power, completely refined by the 9 yang divine art, constantly intertwined and collided between his fingers. At this moment, if Su Qin is not careful and releases these 9 kinds of aura, I'm afraid the entire Shaolin temple will be burned to ashes. If I can sign in and get another true scripture, the 9 true scripture, which is as famous as the 9 yang divine art, then I can use the 9 kinds of yang power of the 9 yang divine art, and the 9 kinds of yin power of the 9 true scripture. Yin and yang generation will it greatly improve my body again. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. As early as more than 10 years ago, Su Qin tasted the sweetness of the 2 cultivation techniques, Invincible Vajra divine art, and Lunar body refining technique. At that time, these 2 cultivation techniques directly improved Su Qin's body to another level. In addition, Su Qin's Shoyun was doubled because of this. It's incredible. At this moment, Su Qin felt the 9 kinds of yang power, which is far beyond the Invincible Vajra divine art, and thought quickly. Su Qin was very clear in his heart that forging the body with the power of yin and yang is extremely risky. Although yin and yang generate each other, they also restrain each other. Without the eyes of truth, Su Qin's body explosion is far more likely than body tempering. This is also the reason why grade 1 great grandmasters can only choose the boundless lunar body or the boundless solar body to transform their body. And it's because they don't want yin and yang to generate each other, but they don't dare. 9 yin true scripture. Su Qin thought for a while and finally sighed. 9 yin true scripture is not a divine art of the Shaolin temple, and now that the demon subduing tower's Dao accumulation is exhausted, he can no longer sign in. Su Qin doesn't think that he can sign in and obtain this true scripture in the Shaolin temple. Right. It's been a while since I entered the Arhat realm, and my realm has been completely stabilized. Now I can comprehend the real Buddha's palm. Su Qin's thoughts moved and he felt the Buddha golden body in his eyebrows that was pointing at the heaven and earth. Chapter 70. The Buddha's palm was the technique Su Qin obtained from his first sign-in. It was known as the strongest technique of the Shaolin temple, and was personally taught by Buddha. At the same time, the Buddha's palm was also the highest level technique Su Qin had obtained over the past 20 years. Since Tuoarahan was able to suppress the devil Buddha with the Buddha's palm, I should be able to use it with my current strength. Su Qin's thoughts turned quickly, and a huge amount of divine sense began to pour into the ancestral aperture between his eyebrows. Buzz! Su Qin seemed to be in a vast void, dreamy, deep, and boundless. In front of him there was a golden Buddha pointing at the sky and touching the earth, filling the void with Zen chants. Under the heavens and earth, I am the unique and righteous. With a boom, the golden Buddha in Su Qin's mind seemed to appear with countless swastikas, innumerable proverbs and Zen chants, shaking his mind. Finally, it turned back into a golden Buddha, still high and mighty, looking down on all living beings. At this moment, Su Qin only felt a sharp pain in his mind, and subconsciously withdrew from the ancestral aperture between his eyebrows. This is... Su Qin opened his eyes and his face was full of shock. In the blink of an eye, Su Qin had roughly understood some information about the Buddha's palm. The Buddha's palm was divided into 9 styles, and each style was independent and dependent on each other. There was no distinction between the top and the bottom. At this moment, Su Qin had mastered the first style of the Buddha's palm. I am the unique and righteous. This style represented the ultimate destructive power, and only powerhouses at least at the level of Arhat could use this style. Su Qin had a feeling that if he really used this style, it would definitely be able to destroy everything. Of course, Su Qin knew very well that this was just his illusion. No matter how strong the Buddha's palm was, it was still based on the user's own strength. If Su Qin had the true strength of the Buddha and used the first move of I, the unique and righteous, he would probably be the only one in the entire universe. But now, Su Qin was just an insignificant first heaven arhat. Even if he used this move, he could at most defeat those of the same level and those of a higher level. It was impossible for him to soar into the sky and truly stand shoulder to shoulder with gods, demons, immortals, and Buddhas. The reason why Su Qin had the illusion that he could destroy everything was that when he received the inheritance of the Buddha's palm, he subconsciously put himself in the perspective of the golden Buddha in the primal aperture at mid-brows. With my current strength, I can only comprehend the first move of the Buddha's palm? Su Qin rubbed his eyebrows as he thought to himself. Just now, when he was immersed in the ancestral aperture between his eyebrows, he had only received the first move before he was forced to withdraw from it due to the excruciating pain in his mind. But it's still okay. Just the first move, I, the unique and righteous, is enough for me to study for a very long time. Su Qin was not disappointed at all. Instead, he was looking forward to it. After all, the entire inheritance of the Buddha's palm was with the golden Buddha in the primal aperture at mid-brows. It would not run away. Once Su Qin's strength reached a certain level, it would be imparted to him. Naturally, Su Qin did not have any other emotions. The level of the Buddha's palm is too high. Su Qin thought for a while and felt very emotional. Originally, Su Qin thought that the Buddha's palm was a martial art at the level of arhat. But now, it seemed that arhat was only able to activate the lowest level of the Buddha's palm. 900 years ago, the Buddha's palm that Tuerahan used to suppress the devil Buddha should not be the first move, I, the unique and righteous. Su Qin glanced at Foshan, his thoughts fluctuating. The 9 moves of the Buddha's palm were independent and dependent on each other. There was no distinction between them. Each of the 9 moves was different. Some were good at destruction, some were good at suppression, and some were good at defense. Su Qin guessed that the Buddha's palm that Tuerahan used to suppress the devil Buddha 900 years ago should be more of a suppression move. Otherwise, if it was like the Buddha's palm that Su Qin obtained from the first move, only I am the best, which was biased towards destruction, then the demon Buddha would have been suppressed to the point that not even dregs were left 900 years ago. How could it still be able to survive until 900 years later? Last time when I came to restabilize the seal, the devil Buddha once said, the true meaning of the Buddha. It should be referring to the golden Buddha in the primal aperture at mid-brows. Su Qin thought silently. Over the years, he had been browsing countless ancient books in the Shaolin Temple. Naturally, he understood what the true meaning of the Buddha's palm was. If the Buddha's palm was still traceable in the thousands of years of Shaolin Temple's history, then the true meaning of the Buddha's palm only existed in legends. To put it simply, the 9 moves of the Buddha's palm were different. No one could master all 9 moves at the same time. But if one had the true meaning of the Buddha's palm, it would be different. The true meaning of the Buddha's palm was equivalent to the outline of the Buddha's palm. It had the effect of controlling the 9 moves. After receiving the inheritance of the first move of the Buddha's palm, Su Qin's life returned to normal. Every day he would sign in, cultivate, and comprehend the first move of the Buddha's palm. His days were especially fulfilling. There shouldn't be much Tao accumulation left in the Sutra Pavilion and the Bodhi Court. On this day, Su Qin finished signing in outside the Bodhi Court. After returning to the forbidden area in the back mountain, he was deep in thought. If my Tao accumulation is exhausted, I should leave the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin's eyes were calm. No one knew what he was thinking. Looks like it's time to leave some foundation for the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin sighed softly in his heart. He didn't dare to say anything. After all, he had stayed in the Shaolin Temple for more than 20 years. In the past 20 years, Su Qin couldn't ignore the vegetarian meals provided by the Shaolin Temple. What should I leave behind? Su Qin fell into deep thought. Su Qin had thought about this question long before he stepped into the realm of arhat. However, Su Qin realized at that time that if the future disciples of the Shaolin Temple couldn't do it, it would be meaningless to leave more. It wasn't as if arhat hadn't appeared in the Shaolin Temple in the past. Many venerable arhat had left some foundation for the Shaolin Temple before they passed away. However, these foundations could be preserved in a short period of time. But over a long period of time, decades or hundreds of years, no matter how strong the foundation was, it would lose its effectiveness. Since things don't work, I'll leave someone for the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin spread out his divine sense and scanned the entire Shaolin Temple, and finally shrouded the Dharma court. Inside the Dharma court, Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads were chatting with Xian Ku. Last time, Abbot Huiwen personally brought Xian Ku to see Su Qin, hoping that Su Qin would accept Xian Ku as his disciple. At that time, although Su Qin wasn't interested, he didn't immediately refuse and only said that he would consider it. The Buddha's heart is incomplete. Can't you just fix it? Su Qin slowly got up and stepped out of the forbidden area. Dharma court. Abbot, what did the Venerable One say? The warrior monastery court head looked at Abbot Huiwen and asked. The Venerable One said that he would consider it for a while. Abbot Huiwen was silent for a while, and then said truthfully, consider it for a while. As soon as he said that, the other court heads fell silent. Although the Venerable One didn't refuse, he probably wasn't interested in accepting a disciple. Otherwise, there was no need to consider it at all. What a pity about Xian Ku's talent. The commandment court head shook his head, and Xian Ku heard the conversation between Abbot Huiwen and the court heads, and his head hung low, as if he had made a big mistake. Just when Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads were certain that Xian Ku wouldn't become that person's disciple. Buzz! A faint Buddha's light began to spread. The Zen chants continued, and golden lotuses bloomed like glass, untainted by dust. Under the shocked gazes of Abbot Huiwen and the others, a figure slowly walked out. He was covered in layers of Buddha's light as if he was far away on the horizon. Golden lotuses bloomed under his feet, and the Zen chants were thick and dignified, as if a Buddha had descended to the world to save all living beings. The figure walked to Xian Ku step by step, and with a golden lotus, he raised his right hand, and his 5 slender fingers stroked Xian Ku's forehead. The Buddha caresses my forehead, and I see the Buddha at the end of the road. Chapter 71. Inside the Dharma court. The light of Buddha filled the air. Golden lotuses bloomed. Su Qin took a step forward, raised his right hand, and gently stroked Xian Ku's forehead with his long and powerful fingers. The incomplete heart of Buddha was basically a congenital cause. But no matter how incomplete it was, there was always a part of the heart of Buddha. With this part of the heart of Buddha, it was completely possible to make it whole. Of course, in the whole world, only Su Qin could do this. Even if the venerable arhat of the Shaolin Temple came back to life, or if it was a martial arts legend from the outside world, it would not be so easy to make the heart of Buddha whole. The eye of truth could see through all the qi in the world, and the heart of Buddha was naturally one of them. Coupled with Su Qin's powerful strength, the combination of the two could achieve this. Venerable. Venerable. Xian Ku opened his eyes wide. When Su Qin's 5 fingers stroked his forehead, he only felt warm and uncomfortable. Even Xian Ku felt his heart beating faster and faster, and the blood in his body was boiling, as if some kind of transformation was happening. Venerable. Greetings, Venerable. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were first surprised, but then seemed to realize something, and bowed to Su Qin. In the entire Shaolin Temple, only the Venerable standing in the clouds could walk into the Dharma court so silently and cause such a phenomenon. Although Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were curious about why Su Qin came at this time, they guessed that it should be related to Xian Ku. Time passed slowly. The light of Buddha slowly spread, as if it was eternal. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads waited respectfully, without the slightest impatience. In fact, under the light of Buddha, even if it was not targeted at them, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads still benefited a little. Half an hour later, Su Qin slowly withdrew his right hand. Just now he had used his arhat's inner energy to help the little monk Xian Ku complete the incomplete Buddha's heart. He had even helped him to cleanse his marrow and tendons. After all, in Su Qin's heart, Xian Ku was the foundation he left for the Shaolin Temple. Naturally, he would pay more attention to him. If the other martial artists in Jianghu were to know that Xian Ku, a young novice monk in his teens, had been cleansed by Venerable Arhat, they would definitely go mad with jealousy. It was worth noting that both Venerable Arhat and martial arts legends had long transformed to another level after experiencing the ultimate leap. Venerable Arhat's meridian changing and marrow cleansing was enough to allow Xian Ku to walk in front of most martial artists in the world before he even stepped on the path of martial arts cultivation. If there are any problems in the future, you can find me at the back of the mountain. Su Qin left these words and turned to leave. The Buddha's light dissipated. The golden lotus melted. The Dharma court immediately regained its peace. It was not until a long time after Su Qin had left that Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads dared to speak. Abbot, did the Venerable One accept Xian Ku as his disciple? The warrior monastery's court head could not help but ask. Although Su Qin did not explicitly say that he accepted Xian Ku as his disciple, since he allowed him to go to the back of the mountain, it was obvious that he had already acknowledged him in his heart. I don't know. How can the Venerable One's thoughts be guessed by us? Abbot Huiwen shook his head slightly, but doubts arose in his heart. But why did the Venerable One come here this time? Speaking of this, Abbot Huiwen turned his gaze and looked at Xian Ku, who had already fallen asleep. Abbot Huiwen finally realized that something was wrong. The current Xian Ku did not have the same vision as before. It was as if everything had returned to normal. Returning to the origin. This is returning to the origin. Abbot Huiwen's face was shocked as he muttered to himself. The other court heads were also in disbelief. At this moment, even if they did not know what Su Qin had done to Xian Ku, they realized that it should be a great thing. Looking at the world, the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. If Xian Ku still maintained the vision from before, no matter how good his aptitude was, he would still suffer in the future. But now, everything was hidden deep within his body. It was neither hot nor hot, but it went straight to the sky. The back of the mountain. Su Qin sat cross-legged, his inner strength slowly circulating in his body, constantly integrating into every piece of flesh and blood, constantly tempering his body. The inner strength of the Arhat state has undergone a fundamental change from the inner strength of the 9th grade martial arts. Su Qin opened his eyes and carefully felt everything in his body. If the inner strength of a grade 1 great grandmaster is like flowing water, then the inner strength of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster is like wood. Then the inner strength of Venerable Arhat is like tempered steel. A wisp of Arhat's inner strength is enough to kill a group of grade 1 great grandmasters. The two are not on the same level at all. In other words, the inner strength of the Arhat state is no longer called inner strength, but true essence or true force? Su Qin thought silently in his heart. It is really true that the inner strength of the Arhat state and the inner strength of the 9th grade martial arts are not the same thing. It is indeed wrong to call them by the same name. The effect of the glazed golden core is almost over. Su Qin's thoughts moved, and another bottle of glazed golden core appeared in Su Qin's hands. Suddenly, the world's essence qi began to faintly boil and gather, but it was immediately suppressed by Su Qin's divine sense. Go! Su Qin swallowed the glazed golden core directly. During this period, Su Qin has consumed nearly 10 glazed golden cores, which really made him feel distressed for a while. However, through signing in, Su Qin once again obtained more than a dozen glazed golden cores, which basically broke even, and there was still a surplus. Whoosh! The colorless and transparent glazed golden core entered his abdomen, and suddenly a huge medicinal power began to spread, constantly condensing into true essence and flowing to his limbs and bones. As Su Qin continues to cultivate, his strength is slowly but firmly moving towards a higher level. Next, Su Qin returned to the past again. Signing in, cultivating and comprehending Buddha's palm's first move. Only I am supreme every day. However, in addition to this, Su Qin will occasionally give pointers to Xian Ku. It has to be said that Xian Ku, who has completed his Buddha's heart, has an incredible perception. Any martial art or Buddhist scripture is basically understood by him. This also saves Su Qin a lot of trouble. He only needs to give pointers from time to time. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. In the past 3 years, the Shaolin Temple hasn't changed much. The only difference is that Xian Ku has stepped into the 7th grade martial artist realm. This made Su Qin quite satisfied. It took him more than 2 months to become a 7th grade martial artist, so Xian Ku is already not bad. However, while the time in the Shaolin Temple is slow, the outside world is surging. The youngest disciple of Taoist Zhang of Wudong Mountain went down the mountain with a sword, wanting to challenge the heroes of the world. The imperial teacher of Meng Yuan led an army of millions and destroyed a small country. The emperor of Tang's palace, the emperor of Tang ordered that Prince Li Shang be conferred the title of crown prince, causing an uproar. Chapter 72. The emperor of Tang's old age was no longer a secret. If it weren't for the purple-clothed eunuch, the court would have been in chaos. But even so, the princes were still fighting openly and secretly, and all the dukes had different thoughts. Even the vassals from all over the country had bet on one of the princes. Originally, in everyone's eyes, the emperor of Tang would eventually appoint one of the most promising princes as the crown prince. After all, among the many sons of the emperor of Tang, except for these princes who had some ability, the others were basically just playing around and waiting for death. However, what no one expected was that the emperor of Tang would eventually choose Prince Li Shang as the crown prince. Prince Li Shang was the son of the emperor of Tang left outside and was brought into the palace a few years ago. The ministers and the princes also knew about this, but they never thought that Prince Li Shang would be appointed as the crown prince one day. Because Prince Li Shang's foundation was too shallow. Shaolin Temple. Su Qin's divine sense swept over and happened to hear some disciples talking about the emperor of Tang's appointment as the new crown prince. Oh! He was indeed appointed as the crown prince. Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. When he first saw Li Shang in the family Su mansion, he saw that he carried nearly 1/10 of the fate of the empire of Tang. As long as such a person didn't die in the future, it was only a matter of time before he ascended the throne. The empire of Tang, Chang'an City. Su Qin's heart skipped a beat. The empire of Tang had been established for 500 years, but the capital of the empire of Tang, Chang'an City, was the ancient capital of 10 dynasties and had a history of thousands of years. For thousands of years, the periphery of Chang'an City may have been renovated countless times, but the core of the imperial city had never changed. Even the jade palaces and lofty palaces in the imperial city were the same as they were thousands of years ago. To some extent, the imperial city of Chang'an had witnessed the rise and fall of 10 dynasties that had stood on the earth for thousands of years. Ancient capital of the 10 dynasties. The Taoist connotation that Chang'an City has accumulated over the past thousands of years is probably similar to that of the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin's eyes lit up and he was excited. Although Su Qin had never been to Chang'an City in person, he guessed that there must be a lot of Taoist connotation in Chang'an City based on its thousands of years of history. It was enough for Su Qin to sign in for a long time. When the Shaolin Temple's Taoist connotation is exhausted, I can make a trip to Chang'an. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. Speaking of signing in, I haven't used my sign-in opportunity today. Su Qin suddenly thought of something, and his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already outside the scripture depository. In the past, I've signed in at the Bodhi Court dozens of times. Now that I have enough glazed golden cores, I'll sign in at the scripture pavilion today. Su Qin muttered in his heart, "System, sign in for me. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the past Amitabha Sutra." A cold, mechanical voice sounded in Su Qin's ears. Past Amitabha Sutra? Su Qin's expression changed slightly. The past Amitabha Sutra is one of the supreme scriptures of Buddhism, on par with the Tathagata Sutra and the Sutra of Future Death. It's at the highest level. Even if it's not as powerful as the Buddha's palm, it's probably not far from it. However, the Shaolin Temple has been open for thousands of years. Even the Patriarch Bodhidharma, who is known to have incorporated many supreme techniques, has never comprehended the past Amitabha Sutra, let alone others. To a certain extent, the past Amitabha Sutra is not for mortals to comprehend. Su Qin didn't expect that this time he would sign in for this supreme scripture. I've really made a fortune this time. Su Qin was overjoyed. A smile appeared on his face as he turned around and returned to the back mountain. For others, even if they obtained the original copy of the past Amitabha Sutra, it was useless, because they wouldn't be able to comprehend the profoundness contained within. Therefore, in the eyes of most people, the past Amitabha Sutra wasn't even as useful as the Arhat Fist. At least, as long as one studied the Arhat Fist seriously, even an ordinary person would be able to comprehend it in a few months. But what about the past Amitabha Sutra? No matter how talented you are or how high your comprehension ability is, what's the use if you can't understand it? But Su Qin is different from others. The secret manuals obtained through the system will be instilled by the system, automatically becoming proficient in them. And the difficulty of the past Amitabha Sutra is that it can't be grasped at all. In other words, the most difficult part of the past Amitabha Sutra is actually the easiest in Su Qin's eyes. Just as Su Qin was thinking, all kinds of comprehensions about the past Amitabha Sutra continuously surged into Su Qin's heart. In a trance in the depths of Su Qin's mind, a Buddha of the past faintly condensed, looking at the present and the future from the distant past. Boom! Su Qin's mind shook, and he suddenly opened his eyes. The past Amitabha Sutra is indeed worthy of being the supreme scripture of Buddhism. Su Qin nodded slightly. Even a venerable arhat like him can't help but be immersed in the past Amitabha Sutra. The past Amitabha Sutra is a mental cultivation method. A mental cultivation method to circulate true essence. With a thought, Su Qin's true essence began to circulate along a special path. Before obtaining the past Amitabha Sutra, Su Qin's mental cultivation method was the Great Arhat Divine Art. The Great Arhat Divine Art is a mental cultivation method at the level of Venerable Arhat. It can greatly increase Su Qin's cultivation speed, and also increase his comprehension and control of heaven and earth. It can be said that the Great Arhat Divine Art is a top-notch mental cultivation method at the level of Arhat. But now, with the past Amitabha Sutra, which is of a much higher level than the Great Arhat Divine Art, Su Qin naturally didn't hesitate to change the Great Arhat Divine Art. Whoosh! Whoosh! Su Qin sat cross-legged, and the true essence of Arhat in his body circulated rapidly, constantly circulating according to the past Amitabha Sutra. Whoosh! As the past Amitabha Sutra circulated, a storm of heaven and earth essence chi 10 times larger than before was suddenly set off in the forbidden area of the back mountain. Countless heaven and earth essence chi condensed into a huge funnel shape, madly pouring into Su Qin's body. Time passed slowly. The storm of heaven and earth essence chi that gathered in the forbidden area of the back mountain not only did not dissipate, but gradually spread toward the entire Shaolin Temple. For a moment, a storm seemed to have formed in the sky above the Shaolin Temple, vast and mighty, covering everything. What is that? Many disciples of the Shaolin Temple looked up, dumbfounded. They were all just doing their own things, cultivating and working, but they didn't expect the heaven and earth to suddenly change. An endless heaven and earth essence chi gathered together, covering everything. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were the first to gather together. The essence chi is like rain. This is a phenomenon caused by the venerables when they have a major breakthrough in their cultivation. Abbot Huiwen muttered to himself with a solemn face. The court heads looked at each other and swallowed their saliva. In their eyes, the venerables were like immortals standing at the top of the world. They simply couldn't imagine, if the venerables continued to break through, what would happen. And just as the disciples of the Shaolin Temple were discussing spiritedly, in the forbidden area of the back mountain, Su Qin, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes. Chapter 73. I didn't expect the past Amitabha Sutra to be so powerful. Su Qin was amazed. He had only cultivated the past Amitabha Sutra for an hour, and he felt that his strength had increased as much as 10 days of hard work. The glazed golden core has also shrunk. Su Qin seemed to have sensed something as he muttered to himself. Normally, a glazed golden core would take Su Qin 1 to 2 months to absorb it. Because the glazed golden core contained too much medicinal power, even someone like Su Qin Arhat would need time to digest and absorb it. But just now, when Su Qin circulated the past Amitabha Sutra, he found that the glazed golden core in his lower abdomen was melting at a terrifying speed. Not bad, not bad. At this rate, I will be able to step into the second heaven of Arhat in a year at most. Su Qin's eyes lit up. Without the past Amitabha Sutra, even with the help of the glazed golden core, Su Qin would need close to 10 years to break through. But now the time was shortened by more than 10 times. And this was because the breakthrough of Arhat was not just about the accumulation of energy, but more importantly, it was about the understanding of heaven and earth. Otherwise, Su Qin's breakthrough would be even faster. Rumor has it that if one fully understands the past Amitabha Sutra, the Tathagata Sutra, and the future Amitabha Sutra, the three supreme scriptures of Buddhism, one will truly be free and unfettered. Su Qin's expression was slightly yearning. Unfortunately, although there are many benefits to cultivating the past Amitabha Sutra, the consumption of the glazed golden core is still too fast, Su Qin thought to himself. Originally, a complete glazed golden core was enough for Su Qin to absorb for 1 to 2 months, but now, he would probably have to take a second glazed golden core in a week. There's some commotion outside? Su Qin's mind moved, and his terrifying divine sense quickly enveloped the entire Shaolin temple. Although the vitality storm outside had begun to dissipate as Su Qin stopped cultivating, it was obvious that it would not completely disappear in a short time. Outside the back mountain forbidden area, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were hesitating whether or not they should enter. After all, the commotion just now was quite big. Even if Abbot Huiwen speculated based on the ancient books in the temple that Su Qin had made a breakthrough in his cultivation, he was still worried. Suddenly, at this moment, a calm voice resounded in the ears of Abbot Huiwen and the court heads. All of you leave. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads immediately bowed slightly. Yes. Meanwhile, outside the Emperor of Tang's palace, Prince Li Shang still had a look of disbelief on his face. Father made me the crown prince? Prince Li Shang blinked his eyes in bewilderment. Although he had known his identity years ago, that he was a descendant of the imperial family. However, Li Shang had never dreamed that he would one day become the crown prince. What was the crown prince? No matter in which dynasty, the crown prince was second only to the emperor, and after the emperor died, he was the rightful candidate to sit on the throne. It could be said that if Li Shang became the crown prince, he would be the future master of the Empire of Tang. Yuner, is this true? Li Shang looked at Su Yueyun next to him. As early as a few years ago, he followed eunuch Lu to the imperial palace, and not long after, he brought Su Yueyun here. Don't be too happy. It's not a good thing for you to become the crown prince. Su Yueyun shook his head and said. It's not a good thing. Prince Li Shang also calmed down. Even he himself had never thought of becoming the crown prince, let alone others. The most important thing was, the Emperor of Tang made him the crown prince. What would the other princes think? What would the ministers in the imperial court think? Over the years, Li Shang's brothers had been fighting openly and secretly for the position of the crown prince, and they had almost shed all pretenses of cordiality. Would they allow the position of the crown prince to fall on Li Shang's head? There were also the ministers in the imperial court. They had long placed their bets on a certain prince, and bet everything that they had on the prince being able to inherit the throne. If the crown prince was gone in the end, what would these ministers who had already taken sides think? Just thinking about it quickly made Prince Li Shang's scalp tingle, and he felt as if he had fallen into a hopeless situation. Don't worry. Since His Majesty has made such a decision, there must be a reason for it. Su Yueyun comforted him. I hope so. Li Shang nodded stiffly. At this moment, suddenly, a servant hurriedly rushed in. Your Highness, someone from the imperial palace is here. Someone from the imperial palace is here? Prince Li Shang was slightly taken aback, and immediately said, I know, I'll go over now. Soon, Li Shang took Su Yueyun outside. At this moment, the door had long been surrounded by the Forbidden Army, and a eunuch wearing a purple official uniform was standing there with a smile. Purple? Li Shang only felt a roar in his head. Having been in Chang, and for so long, Li Shang naturally knew what purple represented in the imperial palace. That was the head eunuch Zhao, who was second only to the Emperor of Tang in the entire imperial palace. Under normal circumstances, eunuch Zhao would serve the Emperor of Tang, and it was absolutely impossible for him to leave the imperial palace. But now eunuch Zhao appeared outside the door. Thinking of this, Li Shang felt a little scared. Your Highness. Seeing Li Shang come out, eunuch Zhao bowed slightly. Eunuch Zhao. Li Shang immediately returned the bow with a solemn expression. I am under His Majesty's order to take your Highness to the Eastern Palace. Eunuch Zhao said slowly. The Eastern Palace? Li Shang was slightly taken aback and said, I'll pack up right away and go to the Eastern Palace with Eunuch Zhao. There's no need. Eunuch Zhao shook his head slightly and said, Your Highness can go with me now. As for the things, the Eastern Palace has prepared everything. But, Li Shang looked hesitant. He looked at Su Yueyun and asked tentatively, "Then Yuner and I will go to the Eastern Palace with Eunuch Zhao." Yun. Eunuch Zhao looked at Su Yueyun and shook his head. Only the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess can stay in the Eastern Palace. As for others, they can't enter. Although Su Yueyun was Li Shang's wife, she had not been officially conferred the title of Crown Princess. After all, even Li Shang had only been informed today that he had become the Crown Prince. How could he have had the time to confer the title to Su Yueyun? "You go to the Eastern Palace first. I'm not in a hurry." Su Yueyun saw Li Shang hesitate and immediately said in a low voice. The one standing in front of them was Eunuch Zhao. If Li Shang's hesitation angered Eunuch Zhao, it would probably cause trouble for the Emperor of Tang. "Your Highness, let's go." Eunuch Zhao saw that Li Shang did not respond and frowned, then glanced at Su Yueyun again. With this glance, Eunuch Zhao glanced at the jade pendant that Su Yueyun had been wearing this entire time. The jade pendant was extremely ordinary, but Su Yueyun carried it close to her body. It was clear that she valued it very much. However, Eunuch Zhao seemed to notice something. His gaze instantly focused on the jade pendant at Su Yueyun's waist. This is... The more Eunuch Zhao looked, the more his heart palpitated. In the end, his expression changed, and his face filled with disbelief. Chapter 74. This is a strand of divine sense of a peak first grade? Eunuch Zhao's expression was extremely solemn as he stared at the jade pendant hanging on Su Yueyun's waist. Although the strand of divine sense in the jade pendant was hidden very deeply, Eunuch Zhao was also a peak first grade. If he wanted to, it naturally could not be hidden from him. What exactly is going on? Could it be that the commoner woman His Highness married has a peak first grade backing her? Eunuch Zhao only felt that it was extremely absurd. How rare is a peak first grade? Which one of them does not oversee a region and live a carefree life? The Emperor of Tang hid Li Shang among the commoners. Eunuch Zhao also knew. Even Eunuch Lu, who had always been secretly protecting Li Shang, was arranged by Eunuch Zhao. Eunuch Zhao knew everything about Li Shang like the back of his hand. As for the daughter of the family Su who married Li Shang, as well as all the information about the family Su, it was naturally placed in front of Eunuch Zhao long ago. What Eunuch Zhao did not even dream of was that the daughter of the family Su in his eyes was actually a peak first grade backing her. Could it be a coincidence? This jade pendant was coincidentally picked up by Su Yueyun. Eunuch Zhao's thoughts turned quickly, but in the end he rejected this idea. There were only so many peak first grade in the world, and even fewer peak first grade who could condense divine sense. As for being willing to split a strand of divine sense and place it in the jade pendant, there were almost no peak first grade. How could the jade pendant Su Yueyun picked up by coincidence be related to a peak first grade? Splitting one's divine sense, if one does not have the relevant secret technique, even for a peak first grade, it will consume one's origin. Unless it's someone who really values him, no peak rank one would do that. In a flash, Eunuch Zhao's thoughts fluctuated. Who is it? One possibility after another flashed through Eunuch Zhao's mind. And just as Eunuch Zhao was thinking, Prince Li Shang was obviously persuaded by Su Yueyun, and was prepared to temporarily go to the East Palace with Eunuch Zhao. After some time, he would ask the Emperor of Tang for the Crown Princess to confer Su Yueyun the Crown Princess title, and then he would take Su Yueyun. "Come, Eunuch Zhao, let's go." Li Shang reluctantly looked at Su Yueyun and said to Eunuch Zhao, Actually, it's not impossible, it's not negotiable. Eunuch of Su Yueyun of His Highness Princess Su, it's only a matter of time. It, sooner or she, it's Princess. And it. Eunuch Zhao glanced at the jade pendant on Su Yueyun's waist, bowed slightly, and said, "Please follow me." Eunuch Zhao said this. Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun were stunned. What was going on? Why did Eunuch Zhao suddenly change his mind? Although Li Shang had never interacted with Eunuch Zhao before, he had a rough idea of what kind of person Eunuch Zhao was from the rumors spread by others. In the entire palace except for His Majesty, no one could change Eunuch Zhao's mind. The princes could not. The ministers could not. But now, Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun looked at each other, and could only bite the bullet and follow Eunuch Zhao. Half a day later, the Emperor of Tang's palace. "Your Majesty, The commoner girl that His Highness married has a great identity. Eunuch Zhao bowed slightly. Then Eunuch Zhao informed the Emperor of Tang that he found the divine sense of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster on Su Yueyun. Oh, interesting. Interesting. The Emperor of Tang's demeanor was obviously much older, and he even coughed violently while speaking. Seeing this scene, Eunuch Zhao's expression changed slightly. He immediately stepped forward, stretched out his right hand, and slowly pressed it on the Emperor of Tang. After a while, the Emperor of Tang's complexion recovered a little, and he waved his hand and said, "What do you think the real owner of the jade pendant means? This old servant doesn't know." Eunuch Zhao paused for a while, and then continued, "But this old servant thinks that the real owner of the jade pendant should not be interested in the battle for the throne. The real function of that jade pendant is to protect, and there is no other purpose." Eunuch Zhao said slowly. It was precisely because of this that he changed his mind and agreed to let Su Yueyun and Li Shang live together in the East Palace. After all, in the face of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster who has not shown any malice, showing goodwill appropriately can only be beneficial and not harmful. If the peak grade 1 great grandmaster standing behind Su Yueyun is willing to support Prince Li Shang, let alone living in the East Palace, even conferring the title of Empress in the future will be a matter of a few words. As long as he can win over a peak grade 1, any price is worth paying. I know. It seems that the luck of this child is better than that of this emperor. The Emperor of Tang leaned slightly on the dragon throne and rubbed his eyebrows, trying to wake himself up. Eunuch Zhao waited on the side and did not speak. Suddenly, the palace fell into silence. After a long time, the Emperor of Tang said slowly, "To be honest, how long can I live?" Eunuch Zhao's expression changed slightly when he heard this. After a moment of silence he said, 3 years, even if this old servant does his best. I can only guarantee that your majesty can live for 3 years. 3 years. It's almost enough time. The Emperor of Tang's expression did not change, as if he didn't hear how long he could live at all. Shaolin Temple. Since obtaining the past Amitabha Sutra, Su Qin seems to have returned to the time when he was in grade 9 martial Dao. He can feel his strength improving every day. The only drawback is that it consumes too many glazed golden cores. It's almost time. It's time to break through. In the back mountain forbidden area, Su Qin sat cross-legged, slowly circulating the true essence in his body and adjusting his state. After consuming dozens of glazed golden cores, Su Qin's cultivation base finally reached peak Arhat first heavenly layer. Let's start. With a thought in Su Qin's mind, 20 glazed golden cores suddenly appeared in front of him. In order to ensure that the breakthrough is foolproof, Su Qin also put in a lot of effort and prepared to use 20 glazed golden cores to force a breakthrough. 1 glazed golden core is enough for a venerable Arhat to digest and absorb for several months. With 20 of them added together, the terrifying medicinal power is probably enough to make venerable Arhat explode. If Su Qin didn't have the past Amitabha Sutra to protect his body, he wouldn't dare to do this. Gulp. Su Qin swallowed a glazed golden core and began to circulate the past Amitabha Sutra to refine the rolling medicinal power. Almost instantly, Su Qin's body began to slowly transform again. Time slowly passed and Su Qin's aura became stronger and stronger, as if the vast void was endless. If it wasn't for the back mountain forbidden area and the Buddha's palm seal left by Tuerahan, Su Qin's aura would have soared into the sky and suppressed the entire Shaolin Temple. Just like this, Su Qin's true essence became more and more boiling. Finally, at a certain moment, it seemed to have broken through some kind of shackles and reached a new realm. Buzz! I've finally entered the second heavenly layer of Arhat. Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, and a smile appeared on his face. Chapter 75. Back Mountain Forbidden Grounds. After Su Qin broke through, he took a deep breath. In an instant, the surging heaven and earth essence qi was sucked into his mouth like a whale sucking in water. I'm so hungry. Su Qin felt that every bone and muscle in his body was trembling, crazily devouring the heaven and earth essence qi that was pouring into his body. Unfortunately, the heaven and earth essence qi was thin to begin with, and could not satisfy the replenishment of his body after the breakthrough. Su Qin had no choice but to take out several glazed golden cores. After the glazed golden cores as pure as glass entered his mouth, they turned into a huge amount of medicinal power that filled every part of his body. Half an hour later, Su Qin opened his eyes again. I didn't expect that after breaking through to the second heaven, I still need a lot of heaven and earth essence qi to replenish my body, Su Qin whispered to himself. If he had not prepared the glazed golden cores, he would have only been able to absorb the heaven and earth essence qi slowly and even cause some damage to his body. But it's all over now. Now I've truly entered the second heaven realm of Arhat. Su Qin's thoughts turned and he looked at his hands, carefully feeling something. In terms of true essence, it's at least 2 to 3 times stronger. My physical body isn't as exaggerated as true essence, but it's still improved. As for my divine sense, it's almost twice as pure, and its range has expanded greatly. Su Qin continued to speculate and finally came to a conclusion. The current me is at least 5 times stronger than before the breakthrough. Su Qin was very satisfied. Originally, a venerable Arhat was already a taboo among taboo, enough to suppress all demons and monsters. But now, Su Qin was equivalent to 5 venerable Arhat. What did that mean? As long as Su Qin wanted to, he could now sweep the world. The empire of Tang and Mengyuan could all stand aside. First, stabilize the realm. Su Qin slowly collected his thoughts. The so-called stabilization of one's realm was naturally not to worry about one's realm slipping. Now that Su Qin had completely stepped into the second heavenly layer, unless he suffered from qi deviation on the spot and his true essence went berserk, it was absolutely impossible for him to drop his realm. Buddhist cultivation techniques were known for their deep foundations, let alone a supreme scripture like the past Amitabha Sutra. The reason why Su Qin wanted to stabilize his realm was because he wanted to familiarize himself with his skyrocketing power. Over the next few months, Su Qin began to read some Buddhist scriptures in addition to his cultivation. Although it had been more than 20 years and Su Qin had already gone through these Buddhist scriptures, now that Su Qin had entered the realm of Arhat, he had a different feeling when he read them again. During this period, Su Qin also didn't forget to sign in. The holy elixirs, divine arts, and secret manuals that he obtained from signing in every day were all thrown into the system space by Su Qin for future use. The flow of time in the system space has almost stopped, so there will be no problem of elixirs losing effectiveness. While reading the Buddhist scriptures, Su Qin would occasionally give advice to Xian Ku. After this little novice monk entered the 7th grade martial artist, he was still preparing to rush into the middle realm in a short time. But in the end, he was stopped by Su Qin. The possessor of Buddha's heart can indeed have unimaginable convenience in martial arts cultivation. But in the past, every possessor of Buddha's heart was unable to achieve the realm of Arhat. Instead, some people who started out ordinary finally set foot on the great Tao. As for the reason in the middle, Su Qin probably guessed it. Therefore, he let Xian Ku slowly experience the difference of each realm and then try to break through. On this day, Su Qin was thinking about how many glazed golden cores he should take when suddenly his expression changed, and he looked outside the back mountain forbidden area. He saw Xian Ku standing there cautiously, not knowing whether to come in or not. "Come in." A calm voice sounded in Xian Ku's ear. "Yes, Venerable One." Xian Ku let out a sigh of relief. Soon, Xian Ku came in front of Su Qin. After a few years, Xian Ku has basically gotten rid of the immaturity of a teenager. Coupled with the internal strength of a 7th grade martial artist, he is basically the same as a normal man. "Venerable One." Xian Ku respectfully bowed to Su Qin. Because Su Qin never said that he would accept Xian Ku as a disciple, Xian Ku can only be like Abbot Huiwen and call Su Qin Venerable One. "Are you going to break through?" Su Qin glanced at Xian Ku and said. In fact, as early as before Xian Ku came in, Su Qin already knew about Xian Ku's situation. "Yes, Venerable One, I can't suppress it anymore," Xian Ku said in a low voice. "Since you can't suppress it, then break through," Su Qin said casually. "Break through here." Su Qin asked Xian Ku to postpone his breakthrough, not because he can't break through. Now that Xian Ku has almost reached the limit of suppression, if he doesn't break through, it will be harmful to himself. Yes. When Xian Ku heard this, he immediately sat cross-legged. Compared to the vision caused by Su Qin's breakthrough, Xian Ku's breakthrough was simply silent. In fact, this was normal. The cultivation of martial artists below the upper realm is mainly focused on the physical body and internal strength, and it doesn't involve the world's essence qi at all. Since it has nothing to do with the world's essence qi, there will naturally be no vision. In less than half an hour, Xian Ku stepped from the 7th grade martial artist to the 6th grade martial artist. There is only a difference of 1 realm between the 6th grade and the 7th grade, but it is the difference between the lower realm and the middle realm. This bottleneck had trapped countless martial artists in the pugilistic world. "Thank you, Venerable One." Xian Ku got up and said respectfully, "Since you have broken through, go down." Su Qin looked at Xian Ku and said, "Venerable One." However, Xian Ku looked hesitant. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. "What's the matter?" Su Qin raised his eyebrows and asked directly. With Su Qin's understanding of Xian Ku in the past few years, if the other party has nothing important, he wouldn't dare to speak like this. "Venerable One, I found a stone door under a hill near the Dharma court. There are some Buddha patterns carved on the stone door. It's very mysterious." Xian Ku paused for a while and continued. "This stone door is very heavy. I can't push it open at all." "Stone door," Su Qin repeated in a low voice. His huge divine sense quickly spread out, like a hurricane, sweeping back and forth the place that Xian Ku mentioned several times. However, what surprised Su Qin was that he didn't find the stone door that Xian Ku mentioned. "Venerable One, I seem to feel that something in the stone door is attracting me." Xian Ku's face was full of confusion. Something in the stone door was attracting Xian Ku, but Xian Ku couldn't push the stone door open. This made him feel very conflicted. Su Qin was silent. If Xian Ku wasn't lying, it meant that the stone door had used some method to deceive his divine sense. Chapter 76. Interesting. Su Qin's expression did not change, but his interest was piqued. One must know that he was now the venerable arhat of the second heaven. Under the cover of his divine sense, almost everything was visible. Unless it was a powerhouse of the same level, there was no way he could miss anything. Could it be that the stone gate was the work of a certain venerable arhat of the Shaolin Temple? Su Qin pondered in his heart. He did not suspect that Xian Ku was lying. First, because Xian Ku did not have the guts to do so. Second, because the place Xian Ku said was in the Shaolin Temple. If Su Qin wanted to verify it, he could do it in an instant. "It seems that there are still some secrets in the Shaolin Temple that I don't know," Su Qin sighed in his heart. The Shaolin Temple was a major martial arts sect with thousands of years of heritage. There were many venerable arhat. Su Qin would not believe that it did not have some foundation. "Venerable, what I said is true." Xian Ku saw that Su Qin did not speak for a long time. He thought that Su Qin did not believe him and suddenly became anxious. Hearing this, Su Qin smiled and said softly, "I know. Now lead the way. I will accompany you to have a look." Su Qin was very curious about which venerable arhat of the Shaolin Temple left the stone gate. Soon, with Xian Ku leading the way, Su Qin came to the stone gate. "It's here." Su Qin glanced around. This was the back of a hill. It was overgrown with grass and trees. Usually, almost no disciples would come here. And the stone gate that Xian Ku mentioned was in an inconspicuous corner. "This is," Su Qin sensed it carefully, "heaven and earth formation?" Su Qin narrowed his eyes. Whether it was venerable arhat or the martial arts legend, they had both transcended the realm of the 9 ranks of the martial arts path. Their cultivation was no longer limited to their own bodies. Instead, it was more about comprehending the heavens and earth. As for the heaven and earth formation, it was something that venerable arhat had comprehended from heaven and earth. There were many types of heaven and earth grade arrays. Some were more inclined towards suppression, such as the heaven and earth grade array in the demon suppressing tower. Some leaned towards killing enemies, while others leaned towards concealment. The heaven and earth formation on the stone door in front of them belonged to the concealment type. It was because of this heaven and earth grade array that Su Qin's divine sense could be temporarily concealed. "Venerable One, this is the place." Xian Ku pointed at the stone door and said in a low voice, "I understand." Su Qin took a step forward and appeared outside the stone door. "Where is this?" In Su Qin's pupils, there was an inexplicable whirlpool spinning. Since he knew that there was a heaven and earth grade array here, Su Qin naturally would not continue to explore with his divine consciousness. Rumble. Su Qin raised his right hand and gently pressed on the stone door. Suddenly, it was as if he had touched a certain mechanism. The whole stone door began to slowly retreat, revealing a dark entrance. Venerable One, Xian Ku was dumbfounded. He had tried his best, but he still couldn't open the stone door. But in Su Qin's hands the stone door was so obedient, and it was opened directly? Su Qin did not speak and walked towards the entrance unhurriedly. Through the eye of truth, Su Qin was very sure that there was nothing in the entrance that could threaten him. Su Qin walked along the stone steps in the entrance and kept walking inside. Xian Ku, on the other hand, stood outside obediently. He didn't want to go in and cause trouble for Su Qin. Soon, Su Qin walked down the stone steps and came to a very empty secret room. There were many bookshelves in the secret room, and many Buddhist scriptures were placed on them. However, most of the Buddhist scriptures had already rotted and only a few were left. Some Buddhist scriptures made of special bark were barely preserved. This secret room has existed for at least 1,000 years. Su Qin guessed in his heart as he walked deeper into the secret room. Soon, he reached the end of the path and saw a monk in a golden cassock sitting there quietly with his legs crossed. The monk in the golden cassock was no longer breathing. Obviously, he had already passed away. He is Tuerahan? Su Qin carefully looked at the monk in the golden cassock, and his expression changed slightly. Tuerahan was the last venerable arhat of the Shaolin Temple. Naturally, there were pictures of him in the temple for future disciples to admire. In fact, not only Tuerahan, but all the other venerable arhat of the Shaolin Temple were the same. Tuerahan from 900 years ago. Su Qin's thoughts turned quickly. There were many rumors about Tuerahan in the Shaolin Temple. As the last venerable arhat, Tuerahan passed away in a hurry before he was 400 years old in order to suppress the devil Buddha. Even the Buddha's palm was lost because of this. No wonder I didn't see Tuerahan's Dharmakaya in the 1,000 Buddhas hall. So it was here. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. This place should have been set up by Tuerahan before he passed away. The heaven and earth great formation outside should also be something he left behind. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. Although he didn't know why Tuerahan didn't pass away in the 1,000 Buddhas hall, but chose this secret room instead, it didn't matter now. That's right. This place has existed for thousands of years. Will there be Dao accumulation for me to sign in? Su Qin's heart moved. It just so happened that he didn't have a chance to sign in today. So he tried to say in his heart, "System, sign in for me." Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Obtained Millennium Bodhi Heart. Millennium Bodhi Heart? Su Qin looked happy. Bodhi Heart is a sacred object of Buddhism, and is extremely precious. The Shaolin Temple has been open for thousands of years, but very few Bodhi Hearts have appeared. The number of Bodhi Hearts is even rarer than Venerable Arhat. Even an ordinary Bodhi Heart can let a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster see their true nature, have frequent epiphanies, and greatly reduce the possibility of cultivation deviation, let alone a Millennium Bodhi Heart. More than 10 years ago, if Abbot Huiwen had a Bodhi Heart when he was breaking through, even if he failed in the end, he wouldn't have cultivation deviation. Unfortunately, the last Bodhi Heart that appeared in the Shaolin Temple was lost hundreds of years ago, and hasn't been recovered yet. As for the Millennium Bodhi Heart, in the ancient records of the Shaolin Temple, this kind of Millennium Bodhi Heart only exists in legends, and no one can prove whether the Millennium Bodhi Heart exists in the world or not. Not bad, not bad. Su Qin nodded slightly. After signing in, he obtained a Millennium Bodhi Heart. Even if Su Qin turned around and left now, he still gained a lot. Glancing at the pale golden Millennium Bodhi Heart that suddenly appeared in the system space, Su Qin calmed down and looked at Tuerahan again. As Venerable Arhat, his body is very strong. Even after thousands of years, he can still maintain his appearance. Su Qin glanced at Tuerahan, and his eyes quickly fell on a stone wall in front of Tuerahan. Huh. Su Qin just glanced at the stone wall, and his expression changed, as if he saw something incredible. Chapter 77. I too am guilty. I too am the eternal sinner of the Shaolin Temple. At the beginning of the stone wall was this line of bloody words. full of endless regret. This stone wall was right in front of Tuarahan, and the bloody words on it were obviously written by Tuarahan. It should be that Tuarahan had suffered greatly before his death, and finally carved these words. Guilty. Tuarahan is the venerable arhat of the Shaolin Temple. Even if the Buddha's palm was lost in the end, it was also because of the suppression of the Devil Buddha. No matter how you look at it, he is not guilty. Su Qin's thoughts turned quickly, and he quickly looked at the bottom of the stone wall. Su Qin had a feeling that everything he saw next was probably the biggest secret of the Shaolin Temple 900 years ago, during the era of Tuarahan. A moment later, Su Qin basically finished reading the bloody words on the stone wall. According to the description of Tuarahan, he achieved Arhat when he was 150 years old, and was invincible in the world. Finally, when he was traveling the world, he received a disciple. This disciple's qualifications were terrifying to the extreme, and even far surpassed the young Tuarahan. This made Tuarahan overjoyed, and he felt that there was hope for the inheritance of the Shaolin Temple. One must know that even the venerable Arhat could only protect the Shaolin Temple for 500 years. After 500 years, when the time comes, the venerable Arhat will also pass away. But the disciple that Tuarahan accepted made him see hope. He saw the hope of breaking through the Arhat realm. Sure enough, Tuarahan's disciple completed 3 transformations in a few decades, reaching grade 1 great perfection, and achieved Arhat before the age of 100. Achieving Arhat before the age of 100, what kind of terrifying qualifications is this? However, things changed. After Tuarahan's disciple achieved Arhat, his temperament suddenly changed, and finally he even fought with Tuarahan. In the end, this disciple turned into the Devil Buddha, and wanted to destroy the Shaolin Temple. When Su Qin saw this, he was silent. Although Su Qin had long known from the ancient books of the Shaolin Temple that the Devil Buddha, who almost destroyed the Shaolin Temple 900 years ago, was a disciple of the Shaolin Temple. But Su Qin did not expect that the Devil Buddha was not only a disciple of the Shaolin Temple, but also a pro-disciple of Tuarahan. Tuarahan is the current venerable Arhat of the Shaolin Temple. How high is his status? And the Devil Buddha, as a pro-disciple of Tuarahan, in the entire Shaolin Temple, I am afraid that he is second only to Tuarahan. No wonder Tuarahan feels guilty. It turns out that the magic that almost destroyed the Shaolin Temple was the disciple that Tuarahan painstakingly cultivated. Su Qin sighed leisurely. Until now, he finally understood why Tuarahan chose to pass away in meditation here, and not in the Thousand Buddhas Hall. Perhaps it was because he was ashamed to face the ancestors of the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin had a rough idea of what happened later. After realizing that not only did he not cultivate the next venerable Arhat of the Shaolin Temple, but he also became a great devil who would bring disaster to the world, Tuarahan chose to suppress the Devil Buddha without hesitation. However, Tuarahan did not expect that the Devil Buddha, who had only stepped into the realm of Arhat for a few decades, would have reached a level similar to his. Devil Chi and Buddhist power changed freely with his every move, and he was actually able to faintly suppress Tuarahan. This scene made Tuarahan decide to suppress the Devil Buddha no matter the price. Otherwise, if the Devil Buddha was allowed to grow for a few more decades, who in the world would be able to suppress him? In the end, Tuarahan used Buddha's palm as the price of 100 years of Shoan to suppress the Devil Buddha. After the Devil Buddha was suppressed, Tuarahan knew that he wouldn't live for much longer, so he hurriedly chose this place to pass away. What a pity! Su Qin shook his head slightly and glanced at the 2 wooden boxes placed in front of Tuarahan. Inside the wooden boxes were the Buddhist techniques that Tuarahan practiced and a Bodhi heart. Su Qin naturally didn't care about these. In the past 20 years of signing in at the Shaolin Temple, he had obtained countless Buddhist techniques, from the most powerful techniques like Buddha's palm to the most ordinary techniques. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had obtained a vast amount of them. As for the Bodhi heart, if Su Qin hadn't received the 1,000-year Bodhi heart just now, he might have taken a few more glances at this Bodhi heart. But at this moment, the 1,000-year Bodhi heart was placed in the system space. Compared to the 1,000-year Bodhi heart, this Bodhi heart in front of him was no different from a stone on the side of the road. It was nothing at all. I finally understand the origin of the Devil Buddha. So he's the only direct disciple of Tuarahan. Su Qin glanced at Tuarahan, who had passed away 900 years ago, and felt a little complicated. Perhaps for the Tuarahan at that time, when he accepted the Devil Buddha as his disciple, he never thought that one day, he would personally nurture a Devil Buddha. It's time to go. With a thought, the 2 wooden boxes placed in front of Tuarahan fell into Su Qin's hands. He didn't like these things, but Xianku outside could use them. While Su Qin's thoughts were fluctuating, he turned around and left the secret room. As for the Dharma body of Tuarahan that had passed away, Su Qin had no intention of moving. Firstly, it was because passing away here meant Poa. Secondly, Tuarahan cultivated the Devil Buddha that almost destroyed the Shaolin Temple. Even if it was unintentional, a mistake was still a mistake. Outside the stone door, Xianku's eyes widened as he stared at the stone door. Why hasn't the Venerable One come out yet? Xianku had a worried look on his face. Although in Xianku's heart, the Venerable One was omnipotent, he still hadn't come out after such a long time. At this moment, a slight sound of footsteps came from inside the stone door. Then Su Qin's figure slowly walked out. Venerable One. Xianku trotted to Su Qin's side, and at the same time, carefully looked inside the stone door. Under Xianku's gaze, the stone door began to slowly block the entrance, and everything returned to its original state. You don't have to come to this place in the future. Su Qin glanced at Xianku, and directly threw the wooden box containing the Bodhi heart into his hand. This is for you. After signing in and obtaining the Millennium Bodhi heart, ordinary Bodhi hearts had basically lost their attraction to Su Qin. Even 10,000 Bodhi hearts couldn't compare to a Millennium Bodhi heart. To others, the Bodhi heart was extremely precious, but in Su Qin's eyes, it was like a dispensable stone. If anyone asks, just say that I gave it to you. After saying this, Su Qin's figure disappeared from where he stood. Chapter 78. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Su Qin sat cross-legged. Look at the 1,000-year Bodhi heart. With a thought from Su Qin, a faint golden 1,000-year Bodhi heart with mysterious patterns on its surface appeared in front of Su Qin. As soon as this 1,000-year Bodhi heart appeared, Su Qin felt an aura of enlightenment envelop him. Under this aura, Su Qin found that his thinking speed increased by several times, and he became extremely clear-headed and rational. Even the Arhat's true essence in his body became extremely smooth. As expected of the 1,000-year Bodhi heart, Su Qin was amazed. He had tried the Bodhi heart before Tuarahan's Dharmakaya passed away, but unfortunately, the Bodhi heart that Tuarahan had could only make Su Qin slightly clear-headed. As for the rest, it had no effect at all. Compared to the 1,000-year Bodhi heart in front of Su Qin, it was as good as nothing. After Su Qin played with the 1,000-year Bodhi heart for a while, he turned his gaze and looked at the entire Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Devil Buddha. Su Qin sighed softly. 900 years ago, it could be said that the Shaolin Temple was at its most prosperous period. In the same era, 2 Arhat Pao and Devil Buddha were born. 2 Arhat in one sect. This was simply inconceivable. But unfortunately, it didn't take long for the Shaolin Temple's prosperity to decline. For 900 years, even if the Devil Buddha was suppressed every 100 years, he would split out a strand of devil will to bewitch the Shaolin Temple disciples and form the Devil Buddha's descendants, constantly depleting the Shaolin Temple's foundation. Otherwise, even if Tuarahan had passed away in a hurry, and the most powerful divine skill Buddha's palm had suddenly been lost. 900 years have passed. The Shaolin Temple may not have given birth to a venerable Arhat, but it is not to the point where there is no grade 1 great grandmaster in this generation. They were almost squeezed out of the great sects of the world. According to the information Pao left behind on the stone wall, although the Devil Buddha is stronger than him, there is a limit to his strength. At most, Pao is at the second firmament? Su Qin pondered slowly, and after being suppressed for 900 years, the Devil Buddha even gave up his physical body in order to survive, surviving as a devil will. His strength has probably fallen below Arhat's level. Su Qin stood up. It's time to get rid of the Devil Buddha once and for all. Su Qin made up his mind. 10 years ago, Su Qin quietly entered the forbidden area of the back mountain in order to sign in. And he also met the Devil Buddha face to face. At that time, the Devil Buddha disguised himself as an enlightened monk and tried to bewitch Su Qin, trying to take away Su Qin's physical body and get rid of the suppression of the seal. Unfortunately, the Devil Buddha didn't expect that the Golden Buddha in Su Qin's ancestral aperture could easily control the sealing power of the Buddha's palm in the forbidden area of the back mountain. In this case, not only did the Devil Buddha not get rid of the suppression of the seal, but Su Qin also reconsolidated the seal and completely suppressed him. Although the Devil Buddha has been suppressed by me again, he is still a hidden danger. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. Su Qin also obtained the Devil Will Split parasitism technique. He knew that even if the Devil Buddha gave up his physical body and survived as a devil will, he could at most live for more than 1,000 years. If this continued, the devil will would also decay. In other words, even if Su Qin didn't care about anything now, the Devil Buddha would slowly die under the suppression of the seal after more than 100 years. But Su Qin was still worried. Since the Devil Buddha could create the Devil Will Split parasitism technique and obtain Shou Yuan, who far surpassed Venerable Arhat, would he create another secret technique to continue living? In Su Qin's eyes, the most unreliable method was suppression. It was fine for ordinary people, but for a genius with terrifying aptitude like the Devil Buddha, as long as he didn't die, he might be able to break free from the shackles in the future and soar into the sky. Su Qin felt that such a genius would only be at ease if he killed him with his own hands. 900 years ago, Tuarahan couldn't do anything to the Devil Buddha, so he had no choice but to suppress him. But today, 900 years later, Su Qin was no longer Tuarahan. With Su Qin's current strength, coupled with the countless methods and trump cards he had, and even the Buddha's palm, even if the Devil Buddha was at his peak, he would have to admit defeat when facing Su Qin, let alone after being suppressed for 900 years. Open! With a thought, Su Qin communicated with the Golden Buddha in the ancestral aperture between his eyebrows, and used it to control the sealing power of the entire forbidden area in the back mountain. Instantly, rumble! The forbidden area in the back mountain began to rumble. With the forbidden area in the back mountain as the origin, the entire Shaolin Temple also shook. The seal of the forbidden area in the back mountain was created by Tuarahan, using the Buddha's palm, and the entire Shaolin Temple to suppress the Devil Buddha. If he wanted to open the seal, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. What happened? Why is there such a vibration? Abbot Huiwen and the court heads' expressions changed, and they looked in the direction of the back mountain almost at the same time. Is it the forbidden area in the back mountain? What's going on? The commandment court head looked dignified. The Devil Buddha was suppressed in the forbidden area in the back mountain. If something went wrong, it would be a disaster for the entire Shaolin Temple. The other court heads also realized this, and their expressions were extremely ugly. Why are you panicking? The Venerable is also in the forbidden area in the back mountain. No matter what happens with the Venerable here, our Shaolin Temple will definitely be able to get through safely. Seeing the court heads' expressions change, Abbot Huiwen immediately reprimanded them. As soon as these words came out, the court heads suddenly came to their senses. Yes, what were they worried about? With the Venerable guarding the forbidden area in the back mountain, even if the Devil Buddha really escaped, what could he do? In the forbidden area in the back mountain, as the seal continued to open, a hole full of dark demonic light appeared. Billowing demonic aura loomed in the hole, slowly spreading in all directions. Ha ha ha! I'm finally out. After 900 years, I'm finally out. A terrifying demonic voice came from the depths of the dark hole, full of a strong sense of ecstasy. Then an illusory demonic shadow came out, raised its right hand, and touched the air as if it was feeling something. The next moment, the illusory demonic shadow raised its head and looked at Su Qin. So it's you, little monk. The illusory demonic shadow smiled, revealing a trace of cruelty. Since you dare to let me out, it seems that you're quite confident? The illusory demonic shadow looked at Su Qin with interest, and said with pity, although I don't know why you have the Tathagata's will, but under the absolute gap in strength, you will know what true despair is. The illusory demonic shadow's words were full of strong confidence. The Tathagata's will was incredible, but the premise was that one had to have enough strength to activate it. You've entered grade 1 at such a young age, you do have potential, the illusory demonic shadow said while looking at Su Qin. However, the next moment, the illusory demonic shadow seemed to have discovered something, and its expression suddenly changed. No, you're not grade 1. You're venerable Arhat? The illusory demonic shadow's pupils dilated, and its face was full of horror. Chapter 79. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. A huge wave of emotion surged in the Phantom's heart. How rare was the venerable Arhat? Even with his talent, it took him 100 years to barely step into this realm. And this was because Tuarahan spent a lot of effort to guide him and even used his blood essence to shape his body. His terrifying talent, coupled with the unique conditions, created the Phantom to reach the Arhat realm in 100 years. But what about Su Qin? The Phantom knew very well that this generation of Shaolin Temple had no venerable Arhat. Since Tuarahan passed away 900 years ago, the Shaolin Temple had never given birth to another venerable Arhat. In other words, Su Qin became venerable Arhat all by himself. Thinking of this, the Phantom couldn't help but feel cold all over. 10 years ago, when Su Qin was strengthening the seal, the Phantom was very sure that Su Qin's bone age was definitely not more than 30 years old. Now he was at most 40 years old. A 40-year-old venerable Arhat? The Phantom only felt his scalp go numb. Now he had been suppressed for 900 years, abandoned his body, and struggled at death's door in the form of a demonic will. His strength had plummeted by a lot. If Su Qin was still first grade, the Phantom was confident that he could deal with him. At the very least, he could escape unscathed. But a venerable Arhat, master, let's talk nicely. Since you let me out, there must be something you need me for. As long as you say it, I will definitely do it. The Phantom didn't dare to continue to call himself this venerable. He wanted to temporarily surrender and save his life first. No need. Su Qin was too lazy to talk nonsense and moved his mind. Suddenly, a small square seal appeared in the void. This small seal was pitch black as if it came from the dark demon abyss. There were still traces of blood at the corners. It was the demon suppression seal. It was the last treasure Su Qin obtained from the demon-subduing tower of the Shaolin Temple. It was known as the nemesis of all demonic cultivators. Rumble. As soon as the devil-suppressing seal appeared, it continued to expand, covering more than half of the sky and slowly falling towards the illusory devil shadow. This is. Extreme fear appeared in the demonic illusion's eyes. As soon as the small seal appeared, the demonic figure felt its strength being suppressed by half. As the small seal grew larger and larger, the suppression also grew heavier and heavier. It was as if the world was collapsing. Ah! The demonic illusory shadow roared again and again, instantly using dozens of life-saving secret techniques, in an attempt to stop the demon-suppressing seal's suppression. However, it was a pity. Against the devil-suppressing seal, all of the methods of the devil shadow were like a gentle breeze, unable to withstand a single blow. A moment later, under the suppression of the devil-suppressing seal, the illusory devil figure completely collapsed. Even the hole he walked out of was also crushed into powder by the devil-suppressing seal. This thing is convenient. Su Qin looked at the devil-suppressing seal that had returned to its original state and was quite satisfied. Although Su Qin could also deal with the Devil Buddha without using the devil-suppressing seal, with this devil-suppressing seal, Su Qin didn't even need to lift his hand. Of course, the Devil Buddha had been suppressed for 900 years and his strength was less than 1%, but the devil-suppressing seal's ability to restrain the world's devil Tao was also very exaggerated. After retracting the devil-suppressing seal, Su Qin returned to his original position and sat cross-legged. Since the Devil Buddha had completely fallen, the sealing power of the Buddha's palm left in the forbidden area of the back mountain was naturally absorbed by Su Qin. Pure land in the palm? Su Qin slowly felt the sealing power, a thoughtful look on his face. 900 years ago, Tuarahan suppressed the Devil Buddha with the third move of the Buddha's palm, pure land in the palm. At the same time, outside the forbidden area of the back mountain, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads widened their eyes in disbelief. The aura of the Devil Buddha has disappeared. It's completely gone. The disciplinary court head whispered, full of disbelief. The other court heads, including Abbot Huiyuan, had similar expressions. Just now they felt a devil chi from the forbidden area of the back mountain from afar. This devil chi was the same as the aura of the true nature of the Devil Buddha's successor more than a decade ago. The moment the devil chi appeared, Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads' expressions changed greatly, because they realized that it was very likely that the Devil Buddha had escaped from the seal. However, before Abbot Huiyuan and the others could speak, the aura that symbolized the Devil Buddha completely disappeared. This kind of disappearance was not the kind of disappearance that was suppressed back, but a complete annihilation, vanishing into thin air. The Devil Buddha's calamity is completely resolved. The warrior monastery head was in disbelief. Since the birth of the Devil Buddha 900 years ago, he almost destroyed the Shaolin Temple. Although he was finally suppressed by Tuarahan, the successor of the Devil Buddha that appears once every 100 years has been consuming the Shaolin Temple like maggots. In this generation of the Shaolin Temple, there is not even a grade 1 great grandmaster, which has a lot to do with the successor of the Devil Buddha. But now, if Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads are right, the Devil Buddha that was suppressed in the back mountain has completely disappeared. Once the Devil Buddha disappears, the successor of the Devil Buddha, who originated from the Devil Buddha, will naturally not appear again. In other words, from today onwards, the Shaolin Temple no longer needs to go through a catastrophe every 100 years. It was the Venerable who did it. Abbot Huiyuan looked at the back mountain with awe in his eyes. The other court heads looked solemn and also looked at the back mountain with great respect. They can't remember how many times Su Qin has helped the Shaolin Temple. Without Su Qin, the Shaolin Temple would have been destroyed long ago. Su Qin has saved the Shaolin Temple many times, and now he has helped the Shaolin Temple solve the problem of the Devil Buddha. For the Shaolin Temple, how can Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads not be in awe? Back mountain forbidden area. Su Qin sat cross-legged. For Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads, and even for the entire Shaolin Temple, he has completely solved the problem of the Devil Buddha. But in Su Qin's eyes, it was just a small matter. It was nothing at all. Even Su Qin felt a little bored. The Devil Buddha, who had been sealed and suppressed for 900 years, didn't give Su Qin any pressure at all. Su Qin didn't even move his hand and solved it with the demon suppression seal. Next, Su Qin returned to his usual peaceful life. Except for signing in every day and occasionally giving advice to Xian Ku, Su Qin was basically cultivating. It has to be said that with the 1,000-year Bodhi heart, Su Qin's comprehension of heaven and earth has improved by leaps and bounds. Coupled with the past Amitabha Sutra's refinement of heaven and earth's essence chi, and the sufficient supply of lustrous golden core, Su Qin's cultivation has grown so fast that it is almost approaching the speed of the 9th grade martial Tao. Time passed slowly. A year passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes. Finally, the peak of the 2nd heavenly layer. Su Qin smiled. Chapter 80. Arhat level of cultivation is really difficult. It took me a year to reach the peak of the 2nd heavenly layer. Su Qin sighed softly, his expression slightly emotional. At this moment, Su Qin's true essence was like a river, constantly surging in his body, and his qi and blood were like an endless ocean. At this level of martial Tao, it was completely out of the scope of human beings. It was easy to destroy Hui City. Since I'm at the peak of the 2nd heavenly layer, I can consider breaking through. Su Qin thought silently. Arhat had 9 layers of heaven, and the gap between each layer was far greater than the 9 grades of martial Tao. But there's no rush, take it slow. I'll wait for a while before breaking through. Su Qin's thoughts flew, and he did not choose to break through rashly. Compared to the cultivation of the 9 grades of martial Tao, Arhat level involves the control of the power of heaven and earth, and needs to be more cautious. When he was at the 9th grade of martial Tao, even if there was a problem in cultivation, Su Qin could rely on his strong body to withstand it. But the cultivation of Arhat level, if something went wrong, the impact on Su Qin would be great. In this case, even if Su Qin thought that he was at the peak of the 2nd heavenly layer, he still needed some time to recuperate and adjust his state. Anyway, Su Qin was different from those old immortals who were close to the end of the Shouyuan. He still had more than 700 years, and he was not in a hurry. 3 months later, Su Qin had adjusted his state to the best. I can break through. Su Qin sat cross-legged in the forbidden area of the back mountain. In an instant, the true essence was running according to the past Amitabha Sutra. Walala! The whole forbidden area of the back mountain once again set off a storm of qi of heaven and earth, and continued to spread in all directions. Suddenly, a storm of qi of heaven and earth appeared again in the sky above the Shaolin Temple. However, the disciples of the Shaolin Temple were obviously used to it and did not make a fuss for the first time. After all, in the past few years there would be a phenomenon every once in a while. Even the timid disciples were not surprised. The Venerable One has broken through again. No matter how numb the court heads were, there was still a trace of shock in their hearts. Didn't the ancient books of the Shaolin Temple record that the cultivation of the Venerable Arhat was as difficult as ascending to heaven? Why was it that when it came to Su Qin, breaking through seemed as easy as eating and drinking? Back mountain forbidden area. As the boundless heaven-earth essence qi surged towards Su Qin, one glazed golden core after another was stuffed into Su Qin's mouth like jelly beans. Su Qin's breakthrough was also coming to an end. A moment later. Third layer of heaven, I finally succeeded. Su Qin opened his eyes, a trace of joy appearing on his face. The breakthrough this time was still the same as before. There weren't any great waves and there weren't any accidents. This feeling of power, Su Qin took a deep breath. After reaching the peak of the second celestial layer, his strength was more than twice as strong as when he first entered the second celestial layer. Su Qin could clearly feel the huge power in his body, as if it could break the void in front of him. Of course, Su Qin knew in his heart that this was an illusion after the surge of power. Not to mention the third celestial layer Arhat. Even the invincible ninth celestial layer Arhat couldn't break through the void. After breaking through and stepping into the third celestial layer Arhat, Su Qin didn't have any complacency. He was still addicted to cultivation day after day. During this period, Abbot Huiwen officially announced that Xian Ku was this generation's Buddha of the Shaolin Temple. Regarding this title, no one in the younger generation of the Shaolin Temple had any objection. Over the years they had watched Xian Ku step by step become a martial artist in the Middle Realm. Naturally, they were convinced. One must know that even the Zhan generation, which was one generation higher than the Xian generation, was mostly hovering in the lower realm, let alone the Xian generation. Except for Xian Ku, the other disciples of the Xian generation were basically between the 9th and 8th grade. Not to mention the middle realm, there wasn't even a 7th grade. In addition, Xian Ku often received guidance from the Venerable in the back mountain's forbidden area. In the entire Shaolin Temple, no one thought that Xian Ku was not worthy of being the Shaolin Temple's Buddha. On this day, Xian Ku came to the back mountain's forbidden area and asked to see Su Qin. Venerable. This disciple is preparing to go down the mountain and enter the world in a month. Xian Ku stood respectfully in front of Su Qin and said in a low voice, "Go down the mountain and enter the world?" Su Qin looked at Xian Ku with a smile on his face. Yes. Xian Ku said seriously, "It is recorded in the Buddhist scriptures that there are great temptations and great risks in the secular world, but only by experiencing the secular world can one cross the sea of suffering and reach the other side. This is your business. As long as you decide to do it, then do it." Su Qin shook his head and said indifferently. In fact, even if Xian Ku did not plan to go down the mountain and enter the world now, in a few years, Su Qin would let him go down the mountain. What did the Shaolin Temple rely on as a martial arts sect in the world? Buddhist scriptures? Buddhism? Don't joke. The Shaolin Temple stood tall in the world and was the head of the 4 Buddhist temples. It had always relied on strength. Without strength, the Shaolin Temple would have been destroyed many times over. If you want to improve your strength, you can't just immerse yourself in hard work. More importantly, you have to go down the mountain and travel, and verify with the martial artists in the world. This was also the reason why the Shaolin Temple sent disciples down the mountain every generation. One was to promote the reputation of the Shaolin Temple, and the other was to train the disciples of the Shaolin Temple. It was not only the Shaolin Temple, but also the major sects in the world. For example, thousands of years ago, the youngest disciple of perfected Zhang of the Wudong Mountain went down the mountain and challenged the heroes of the world. Thank you, Venerable One. Xian Ku heard that Su Qin had no objections and quickly replied, "You may leave." Su Qin waved his hand and said, "Yes, Xianku immediately left the forbidden area in the back mountain respectfully. Late at night, the full moon hung high in the sky. The sign in opportunity has refreshed. Su Qin's figure flashed and appeared outside the Bodhi court. The Bodhi court was the place where the Shaolin Temple's pills were produced. It could be said to be one of the most important places in the Shaolin Temple. There were a large number of patrolling monks guarding it 24 hours a day. However, with Su Qin's strength, even if he walked in front of these patrolling monks, they wouldn't be able to notice him. System sign in. Su Qin stood in front of the Bodhi court and said in his heart, "Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill." 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill? Su Qin's eyes lit up. The 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill was the same as the glazed golden core. It was a sacred pill on the level of Arhat. However, the medicinal power of the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill was several times that of the glazed golden core. If the glazed golden core was like a slow stream, then the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill was like a surging river. This was also the reason why Su Qin had been taking the glazed golden core all these years and not the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill. This was because Su Qin's previous physical body couldn't withstand the violent medicinal power of the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill. Now that I have stepped into the 3rd heavenly layer, can I try to take the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill? This thought flashed through Su Qin's mind. Chapter 81. Outside the Bodhi court. Su Qin's mind was in turmoil. Forget it. For now, the glazed golden pill is the most suitable for me. If I take the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill rashly, I might be able to absorb it, but I will definitely waste a large portion of its medicinal properties. It's not worth it. Su Qin shook his head. After all, he had less 9 Revolutions Whirling Pills than glazed golden pills. He had less than 500 pills in total. He had to use them sparingly. According to the ancient records in the Shaolin Temple, compared to Arhat's 1st to 3rd heaven, the 4th heaven will undergo some kind of qualitative change. It won't be too late to take the 9 Revolutions Whirling Pill then. Su Qin was in a good mood. He turned around and returned to the forbidden area in the back mountain. Time passed slowly. A month later, before Xianku left the mountain and entered the world, he came to the forbidden area in the back mountain to bid farewell to Su Qin. "Venerable One, I'm leaving today." Xianku looked a little disappointed. Although he had been prepared for this, it was not until now that he realized how lively and lovely the plants and trees in the Shaolin Temple were. However, entering the world to cultivate was something Xianku had to do as the Arhat of the Shaolin Temple. Perhaps other disciples could find excuses, but Xianku could not avoid it. "I've taught you for so many years. Let me give you a small gift before you leave." Su Qin sat cross-legged, raised his right hand, and took out an exquisite wooden sword the size of a palm. The wooden sword was very ordinary. It seemed to be carved from the most common wood in the Shaolin Temple. "Thank you, Venerable One." Xianku liked the wooden sword very much. He wore it around his neck and hung it in front of his chest. "You may leave." Su Qin waved his hand. Yes. Xianku respectfully left the forbidden area in the back mountain. It's been so many years. Su Qin felt a little emotional. The little acolyte in his teens was now ready to leave the mountain and enter the world. With that wooden sword, there shouldn't be any danger. Su Qin thought casually. The palm-sized wooden sword that Su Qin gave to Xianku was naturally carved by him casually. However, Su Qin had left behind a strand of sword intent within the wooden sword. That sword intent was formed with the Dharma sword art as the foundation. Once Xianku was in danger of death, this sword intent would be activated. And with Su Qin's current strength, if the sword intent in the wooden sword is really stimulated, even if he can't kill a legend, he can kill a grade 1 great grandmaster. This was also a life-saving measure that Su Qin had left for Xianku. After all, Xianku had entered the secular world to cultivate, not to die. Even if they really encountered a life and death crisis, they couldn't really let Xianku die. However, Su Qin didn't think that Xianku's life would be in danger. The Shaolin Temple is a great sect, and Xianku is the current Buddha. Once he really leaves the mountain and enters the world, the various sects and forces will more or less give him some face. Even if they don't have a good impression of the Shaolin Temple, it is impossible for them to kill Xian Ku. After all, what's the point of killing Xian Ku? In addition to completely angering a great sect like the Shaolin Temple, what other benefits can there be? After Xian Ku left the back mountain, he went straight out of the Shaolin Temple. Outside the Shaolin Temple, the sky was high and the ground was wide. Xian Ku walked all the way, and when he encountered injustice, he saved people. And when he encountered people who died unjustly, he chanted sutras. After a period of time, Xian Ku also met many disciples of other sects in the Jianghu. These disciples were basically the same as Xian Ku. They entered the world to temper themselves and prove themselves. Among them was Zhang Xiao, the youngest disciple of perfected Zhang of the Wudong sect. It was said that Zhang Xiao finished the Tai Chi mental path on Wudong Mountain before he was 10 years old, and directly alarmed perfected Zhang, who had been in seclusion for many years. Zhang Xiao had entered the world a few years earlier than Xian Ku. He had already been in the Jianghu for a while, and had even earned the title of Little Perfected Master. Other than Zhang Xiao, there were also disciples of other great sects in the Jianghu. These disciples all came from the righteous sects, and what they did in the world was basically chivalrous. Little monk, I heard that an arhat appeared in the Shaolin Temple. Is it true? Zhang Xiao, who was wearing a Taoist robe, asked in boredom. He had always been carefree and unrestrained. Other than perfected Zhang, he was not afraid of anyone. Namo Amitba. Xian Ku put his palms together and did not answer. Before entering the world, Abbot Huiwen had told Xian Ku not to reveal any information about Su Qin. Zhang Xiao stopped teasing Xian Ku. A girl next to him glared at Zhang Xiao and said unhappily, "He, Lu Rumei, why are you speaking up for the little monk? Do you like him?" Zhang Xiao teased. "You." The girl named Lu Rumei drew her long sword and slashed at Zhang Xiao. A faint sword chi swept past. Zhang Xiao's body suddenly flashed and he took a few steps back. "You crazy woman, you really dare to attack?" When the others saw this scene, not only did they not come forward to mediate, but they also watched the show. They were all disciples of the righteous sects, and naturally knew when to stop. Whether it was Zhang Xiao or Lu Rumei, they stopped after testing the waters a little. They would not really fight. At the same time, inside a villa, several silhouettes stood there quietly. These figures were obviously powerful martial artists, especially the leader, a man with a hooked nose. His aura was surging and enveloping the surroundings. He was a grade 1 great grandmaster. "Villa Lord, we have investigated clearly. Wudong Mountain's Taoist Zhang's prodisciple Zhang Xiao will pass by here tomorrow." At this time, a man in black walked in and knelt down in front of the hooked-nosed man. "Is this true?" The hooked-nosed man's eyes lit up and he immediately asked. "According to the route, unless they go back the way they came, they will inevitably pass by here." The man in black said without hesitation, "That's good. That's good." The hooked-nosed man laughed wildly, and his expression became colder and colder. "Taoist Zhang, 30 years ago you killed my son, causing my bloodline to end. Now, I will kill your youngest disciple as a sacrifice to my son's soul in heaven." The hooked-nosed man said word by word. The rest of the people present immediately lowered their heads, not daring to look directly at the hooked-nosed man. "Villa Lord, what if we kill Zhang Xiao and provoke Taoist Zhang to come out for revenge?" A figure standing next to the hooked-nosed man asked. "Haha," the hooked-nosed man shook his head. "Don't worry, if it was somewhere else, there would be too many people and I wouldn't dare to kill Zhang Xiao." But here, when the hooked-nosed man said this, a smile appeared on his face. "If we kill Zhang Xiao here, no one will know." The hooked-nosed man's face was full of confidence. With his strength as a grade 1 great grandmaster, if he wanted to kill Zhang Xiao, he would have done so long ago. The reason why he waited until now was to wait for a foolproof opportunity. And now the opportunity had finally arrived. Chapter 82. The next day, Xian Ku and the disciples of the other sects walked through a wasteland and stopped in front of a villa. "Let's go in and rest for a while," someone couldn't help but suggest. Most of them were martial artists in the middle realm. Although they had internal strength to protect their bodies, it was impossible for them to really go without sleep. "Okay, Zhang Xiao glanced at the villa and nodded in agreement after confirming that there was no problem. Wait a minute. At this time Xian Ku suddenly spoke. Let's not rest here. Xian Ku was silent for a while and said. When Xian Ku looked at this villa just now, he always had an inexplicable feeling of fear. Although Xian Ku didn't know why, he also realized that this was a warning from his Buddha's heart. Not resting here? Zhang Xiao was slightly taken aback and looked at Xian Ku, frowning. What do you mean? I don't know, I just feel that this villa is very dangerous. Xian Ku shook his head and explained. Regarding the warning from the Buddha's heart, it was a mystery. He didn't know how to explain it, so he could only say what he felt. Dangerous? Zhang Xiao looked back at the villa again. In that case, let's not stop and leave directly. Zhang Xiao thought for a while and immediately said. When the others heard this, although they were a little dissatisfied, they didn't say anything. For martial artists like them, even if they were a little tired, they could still support themselves. However, just when Xian Ku and others were about to leave, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded. Hee, since you're here, did you ask me if you want to leave? A man with an aquiline nose slowly walked over. The moment the aquiline nose man appeared, dozens of men in black quietly surrounded Xian Ku and others. Trouble. Zhang Xiao looked dignified. At this moment, how could he not know that his group had fallen into a trap? May I ask who you are? My master is Wudong Daoist Zhang. Zhang Xiao reported his name without hesitation. The aquiline-nosed man not far away gave Zhang Xiao an extremely dangerous feeling. Although Zhang Xiao did not know how strong the hook-nosed man was, it was obvious that he was far stronger than him. Under such circumstances, Zhang Xiao naturally wouldn't think of challenging them. He directly reported his background, which was more direct than anything else. The others heaved a sigh of relief when they heard this. In their opinion, Immortal Zhang of Wudong Mountain was famous all over the world. Once the other party knew that they were related to Immortal Zhang, they would definitely let them go. However, when the hook-nosed man heard the words Daoist Zhang, not only did he not show any fear, he even laughed heartily. Daoist Zhang? The one I killed was Daoist Zhang's disciple. The hook-nosed man laughed wildly. Men, take them down. Immediately, dozens of men in black rushed up without hesitation. Suddenly, a Lao Dao priest in a Taoist robe appeared and grabbed Zhang Xiao's shoulder, trying to escape. Martial uncle? Why are you here? When Zhang Xiao saw the Lao Dao officer, he was stunned for a moment before he was overjoyed. The Lao Dao officer was his martial uncle, a second-level supreme power master of Wudong Mountain. Zhang Xiao himself didn't expect to see his martial uncle here. Ha 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 ha. I found you long ago. The hook-nosed man not far away sneered, raised his right hand and pressed toward the Lao Dao officer. Buzz! A powerful force pierced through the air and landed on the old Daoist's body. Puff! The Lao Dao officer's face immediately turned red, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He took a few steps back and almost sat on the ground. You should be Zhang Zhao's protector, right? The hook-nosed man looked at the Lao Dao officer and said slowly. With Zhang Zhao's identity, how could there be no one to protect him when he went down the mountain? The hook-nosed man didn't make a move just now because he was waiting for these people to come out. And you, all of you, come out. The hook-nosed man turned his eyes and looked at the others. Hey, may I know who you are? If I remember correctly, we don't know you. One after another, figures came out from the dark and looked at the hook-nosed man and asked in a deep voice. Indeed, I don't know you. The hook-nosed man's face showed a trace of coldness. But since you are here, then go to hell. In an instant, the aura of a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster erupted. The expressions of the upper realm martial artists who were hiding in the dark to protect their disciples changed greatly. They flew out one after another and fell to the ground. Can't even withstand a single blow. The hook-nosed man smiled contemptuously. With his strength as a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, suppressing these protectors was as simple as drinking water and eating. Seeing this scene, the disciples of the major sects suddenly felt their hands and feet go cold. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that their family's elders would not even be able to withstand a single blow from that hook-nosed man. You guys go. Run as far as you can. At this moment, the Lao Dao officer of Wudong Mountain suddenly shouted. When these words came out, everyone sobered up. Yes, The most important thing now is not to stand in place and wait, but to escape alive. Run. A trace of ridicule appeared on the hook-nosed man's face. How can these disciples, who are not even in the upper realm, escape from the hands of a grade 1 great grandmaster like him? Let's go. Zhang Xiao retreated to Xian Ku's side and quickly said, Martial Uncle just told me that he will use a secret technique to delay that person for a while. We should take advantage of this opportunity to escape. Then let's run together. Lu Rumei said with a trembling voice. She is of noble birth. When has she ever been frightened like this? It is already good that she can still stand at this moment. Okay. Xian Ku nodded. At this moment, although he was in crisis, Xian Ku felt unprecedentedly sober. Just as Xian Ku's voice fell, the aura of the Lao Dao officer of Wudong Mountain suddenly soared, and he rushed towards the hook-nosed man. A secret technique? The hook-nosed man shook his head and took a step forward. He appeared beside the Lao Dao officer and suddenly punched. Boom! The Lao Dao officer's face suddenly turned as white as paper, and he fell to the ground and fainted. This, Zhang Zhao's face was extremely ugly. Lu Rumei next to him was so scared that her legs trembled. They didn't expect that the Lao Dao officer who used a secret technique would still be so weak. I'm not going to play with you anymore. The hook-nosed man's face showed impatience. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed Zhang Xiao. Don't worry, you won't die so easily. I will let you taste the most extreme torture in the world before I send you down. The hook-nosed man looked at Zhang Xiao with eyes full of cruelty. It's over. Zhang Zhao's face was ashen. At this moment, his internal strength was sealed by the hook-nosed man. He couldn't even commit suicide. As for you, I have no enmity with you, but you saw something you shouldn't have seen. The hook-nosed man turned his gaze and looked at Xian Ku and the others. He raised his left hand and terrifying internal strength surged. He wanted to smash Xian Ku and the others into meat paste. What to do? What to do? The other disciples were already scared out of their wits and subconsciously ran in all directions. Even their elders in the upper realm died here, let alone them, the younger generation. Lu Rumei's face was also pale. She was so scared that she hid behind Xian Ku and closed her eyes, waiting for death. Little monk Xian Ku, I didn't expect that I would die with you, Lu Rumei muttered to herself. With death at hand, Lu Rumei suddenly felt relaxed. Namo Amitba. If I don't go to hell, who will? Xian Ku stepped out and rushed towards the hook-nosed man. Although Xian Ku knew that he was going to die, but at this moment between dying on his knees and dying standing, he obviously chose the latter. You little bald donkey, your courage is not bad. The hook-nosed man shook his head slightly and said, but it's a pity, in front of me, courage is meaningless. The hook-nosed man's expression was cold. His left hand suddenly changed and a terrifying pressure quickly shrouded the field. Boom! Xian Ku felt as if he was struck by lightning, and his consciousness began to blur. Am I going to die? Scenes appeared in Xian Ku's mind, and finally stopped on Su Qin, who was sitting cross-legged in the back mountain. At last, I have seen the Venerable for the last time. Just as Xian Ku calmly welcomed death, the palm-sized ordinary wooden sword that he had been wearing around his neck and hanging in front of his chest quietly began to vibrate. Gotcha! The wooden sword moved without wind, floating in the void. The tip of the sword pointed upwards, and slowly slashed towards the hook-nosed man. What is that? The hook-nosed man was a grade 1 great grandmaster and immediately noticed the palm-sized wooden sword on Xian Ku's neck. Not good. The hook-nosed man felt a sense of life and death crisis in his heart and was about to retreat. However, at this time the palm-sized wooden sword on Xian Ku's neck slashed down. Tear. An extremely illusory sword intent condensed from the void and slashed towards the hook-nosed man. No one can describe the sharpness of this sword. When this sword slashed out, it was as if even the void was cut in two. In the eyes of the hook-nosed man, he only saw a sword intent permeating the air. This sword intent crossed a distance of hundreds of meters in an instant and easily cut through the hook-nosed man's internal strength and directly cut him in two. The remaining sword intent swept through and penetrated the villa behind the hook-nosed man. Rumble. A smooth fracture suddenly appeared in the middle of the huge villa, and it continued to crack and spread. The entire villa was divided into two in an instant. This is Everyone who saw all this was suddenly stunned and their minds went blank. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.